Chapter 1963. As he was distracted, he was forced back by Lin Qing's sword. Actually, Li Ku and Lin Qing knew each other before. After all, they were both sword cultivators and were both at End Realm. Their strengths were on the same level. So in the past, Lin Qing and Li Ku had come into contact several times, although they weren't close. Because they knew each other, Li Ku was so surprised when he saw Lin Qing. He really didn't expect Lin Qing to join the sword sect. No, it should be said that Lin Qing returned to the sword sect. After all, Lin Qing was an elder of the sword sect. After forcing Li Ku back with one sword, Lin Qing didn't continue to attack. He had other thoughts in his heart. Bloodblade Valley, Deceased Demon Sect, and Sky Sword Sect. Among these three sects, the weakest was undoubtedly the Sky Sword Sect. Moreover, the Sky Sword Sect had some ties with the Sword Sect. When the Sword Sect was at its peak, the Sky Sword Sect was actually a subsidiary sect of the Sword Sect. At that time, the previous sect leader of the Sky Sword Sect, who was Li Ku's master, wanted to bring the Sky Sword Sect into the Sword Sect and become a true member of the Sword Sect. Unfortunately, the Sword Sect didn't care about the Sky Sword Sect at that time, so they rejected Li Ku's master. Actually, there was nothing strange about this. After all, when the Sword Sect was at its peak, the two words Sword Sect represented all the sword cultivators in the world. Any sword cultivator in that era would feel proud to be able to join the Sword Sect. Since the Sky Sword Sect and the Sword Sect had such a relationship, and everyone in the Sky Sword Sect were sword cultivators, wouldn't the strength of the Sword Sect increase tremendously if they could pull the Sky Sword Sect over? Lin Qing had his reasons for wanting to recruit Li Ku. First of all, no matter how much the Sword's Gate had declined, it was still once glorious. Some things that were deeply ingrained in their bones were not something that could be easily changed. For example, the longing that sword cultivators had for the Sword Sect still existed to this day. Some sword cultivators still wanted to join the Sword Sect. It was precisely because the Sword Sect had such a glorious past that the entire Sky Sword Sect did not reject the Sword Sect from the bottom of their hearts. Frankly speaking, the reason why Li Ku had joined forces with the Bloody Blade Valley and the Deceased Demon Sect to attack the Sword Sect was because he wanted to obtain the foundation of the Sword Sect. After all, that was something that all sword cultivators yearned for even in their dreams. He was tempted by benefits, but from another perspective, he was immediately tempted by benefits. This proved that there was something in the Sword Sect that attracted him. In this case, Lin Qing could also use this method to rope in Li Ku. He already had a plan in mind. At the same time, Li Ku attacked with his sword. Seeing this, Lin Qing raised his sword to block. Li Ku, this time, you led the Sky Sword Sect to attack the Sword Sect because of the foundation of the Sword Sect, right? After all, to sword cultivators, the Sword Sect was like a holy land. Hearing Lin Qing's words, Li Ku did not understand what he meant. He frowned, but he did not retort. So what if it is? Li Ku agreed to join forces with Lin Gang and the Blood Demon Ancestor because of the foundation of the Sword Sect. Hearing this, a smile flashed across Lin Qing's eyes. The Bloody Blade Valley should be in Wuzhou now, right? Li Ku, what do you think of the Sky Sword Sect's strength compared to the Bloody Blade Valley? Lin Qing asked. However, he did not immediately answer this question. It was not that he did not know the answer, but that he did not want to answer. Compared to the Bloody Blade Valley, the Sky Sword Sect was naturally weaker. Not to mention other things, just in terms of End Realm experts, the Bloody Blade Valley was stronger than the Sky Sword Sect. After all, in the entire Sky Sword Sect, Li Ku was the only End Realm expert. On the other hand, the Bloody Blade Valley had He Ying and Lin Gang. Seeing that Li Ku's face sunk, but he did not answer, Lin Qing did not mind and continued to speak slowly. It seems like you know the answer. Let me ask you, if the attack on the Sword Sect fails, what will happen after the Sky Sword Sect and the Bloody Blade Valley return to Wuzhou? Lin Qing continued to ask. Facing this question, Li Ku did not answer, and Lin Qing continued to speak without caring. Let me tell you, if the attack on the Sword Sect fails, the Bloody Blade Valley's next target will be your Sky Sword Sect. At that time, the Bloody Blade Valley will want to dominate Wuzhou and destroy your Sky Sword Sect. A mountain could not accommodate two tigers. This was a very normal thing. Just like the Sword School and the Blood Saber Valley from before. Because they were both in the Jian province, the two sects could be said to be in a situation where only one side would rest. After all, no one wanted another to sleep soundly beside their bed. A cold glint flashed across Li Ke's eyes when he heard Lin Qing's words. However, he quickly hid it, after which he said in an indifferent voice, "Lin Qing, there is no need to use such a childish tactic to sow discord." Li Ke thought that Lin Qing was trying to sow discord. Hearing this, Lin Qing laughed out loud. "Ha, sow discord? I'm not that bored. Moreover, with the strength of my sword sect, why would I need to sow discord? This time, even if the three sects work together, if we fight to the death, the winner will be my sword sect. There is no doubt about that." After hearing that he was trying to sow discord, Lin Qing laughed loudly. His words were full of arrogance, as if the sword sect did not put the three sects in their eyes. Facing Lin Qing's laughter, although Li Ke's face sank, he did not refute because this was the truth. They had underestimated the strength of the sword sect. Seeing that Li Ke did not refute his words, Lin Qing quickly stopped laughing and took the initiative to retreat. Not knowing what Lin Qing was trying to do, Li Ke also stopped what he was doing. The two of them looked at each other. At this moment, Li Ke finally realized that Lin Qing probably had other intentions. He immediately asked in a deep voice, "Lin Qing, what exactly do you mean?" "Nothing. I just wanted to say that you should think about the Sky Sword sect." "You?" Hearing Lin Qing's words, Li Ke was taken aback. Then he shouted angrily. However, Lin Qing did not give Li Ke a chance to speak. As soon as Li Ke opened his mouth, Lin Qing spoke first. "Li Ke, come to my sword sect and lead the people of the Sky Sword sect to join the sword sect. This is your best and wisest choice. Otherwise, it won't be long before the Sky Sword sect is annihilated." After saying so much, Lin Qing finally expressed his thoughts and extended an olive branch to Li Ke, inviting him to join the sword sect and lead the entire Sky Sword sect to join the sword sect and become a part of the sword sect. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1964. Li Ke, come to my sword gate. Hearing Lin Qing's words, he was stunned for a moment before he shouted coldly, "Lin Qing, are you joking? My Sky Sword sect is attacking the sword sect right now. And want to rope me in?" The Sky Sword sect and the sword sect were enemies, but Lin Qing was trying to rope in Li Ke and the entire Sky Sword sect. Wasn't this a joke? Lin Qing didn't seem to mind Li Ke's words at all. "Do you think I'm joking? As for the enemy you speak of, to be honest, the Sky Sword sect isn't strong enough to become the sword sect's enemy." Lin Qing's words were very arrogant, and Li Ke's eyes flashed with anger. After all, he was the sect master of the Sky Sword sect. It would be strange if he wasn't angry when someone spoke to him in such a manner. However, Lin Qing acted as if he didn't see the anger on Li Ke's face. He continued to speak with a smile. "Think about it yourself. If we fail to attack the sword gate this time, what will your Sky Sword sect face? Moreover, although our sword gate has declined now, in a short 10 years, our sword gate's improvement is obvious to all. I believe you have a deep understanding of this. Moreover, the current sect master of the sword sect is the successor of the Sky Splitter Sword Sovereign. Although he is young, his talent is outstanding. In a short 10 years, he has broken through to the realm of enlightenment. Can't such a person help the sword sect rise again? Finally, although our sword sect strength is far from its peak, we have preserved most of our foundation. With this foundation and a new sect master, do you think the sword sect can't rise again? Li Ke, think about it carefully. Is it better to be the sect leader of the Heavenly Sword sect or the vice sect leader of the sword sect? With your cultivation, if you join the sword sect, I, Lin Qing, can guarantee with my life that you will definitely become the vice sect leader of the sword sect. When the sword sect rises, your status will be unimaginable. Moreover, isn't joining the sword sect your master's wish?" Li Ke fell silent when he heard that. Lin Qing's words did make sense. If they failed to attack the sword sect this time, the Sky Sword sect would definitely fight with the Bloodblade Valley. Regardless of whether they won or lost, it was not something the Sky Sword sect wanted to see. Moreover, with the strength of the Sky Sword sect, it was indeed too difficult to defeat the Bloodblade Valley. There was almost no chance. Moreover, Lin Qing also said that if Li Ku joined the Sword sect, he could definitely become the vice sect leader of the Sword sect. Although it was only a vice sect leader, in terms of power and status, the vice sect leader of the Sword sect was obviously much more powerful than the sect leader of the Sky Sword sect. Lastly, and also what Li Ku valued the most, was Lin Qing's last sentence. It had always been his master's wish to merge the Sky Sword sect into the Sword sect. It was not an exaggeration to say that Li Ku's master was definitely the most loyal supporter of the Sword sect. In the eyes of Li Ku's master, the true top sword cultivators in the Great Thousand World should all join the Sword sect. The two words Sword sect were a type of belief in Li Ku's master. After falling silent for a while, Li Ku looked at Lin Qing and slowly said, "Will sect master Xiao Chan accept my Sky Sword sect joining the Sword sect?" Hearing Li Ku's words, Lin Qing immediately laughed out loud. The fact that Li Ku asked this question meant that Li Ku was moved. Lin Qing immediately smiled and said, "Haha, I've already said it. The Sky Sword sect doesn't have the qualifications to be the Sword sect's enemy. Therefore, you don't have to worry about this at all. I can guarantee it with my life." The Sword sect needed to develop quickly. Moreover, with Xiao Chen's temper, Lin Qing was sure that if Li Ku agreed to join the Sword sect, Xiao Chan would definitely not reject it. As for whether Li Ku would be loyal after joining the Sword sect, there was no need to worry about this at all. Because even if Li Ku had other thoughts, could the other four vice sect leaders, Song Xing, Lin Qing, Zhou Song, and Wu Huan, be just for show? Four of them couldn't take down Li Ku. It could be said that if Li Ku joined the Sword sect, it would only benefit the Sword sect. This was why Lin Qing spent so much effort to recruit Li Ku. Xiao Chen did not know what had happened between Lin Qing and Li Ku. At the place where he was, the experts of the sword school were already engaged in a fierce battle with the people of the Bloodblade Valley. Song Xing was fighting He Ying, while Zhou Song was fighting Lin Gang. However, between End Realm experts, it was hard to determine a victor in a one-on-one situation. Therefore, even if Xiao Chan really wanted to kill Lin Gang and He Ying, it would be very difficult for him to do so. After all, the difference in strength between the four of them wasn't that big. It was too difficult to kill them in a one-on-one situation. After all, End Realm experts were especially easy to kill. However, Xiao Chun couldn't interfere in an End Realm level battle. Not to mention End Realm experts, Xiao Chun didn't even have the ability to interfere in a Dao Realm level battle. Although he had already broken through to the Comprehension Realm, Xiao Chun was very clear that there was still a huge gap between him and true experts like Song Xing. Therefore, Xiao Chun didn't take the initiative to search for the Bloodblade Valley experts. Instead, he fought with an elder who was at the small completion realm of comprehension. Xiao Chun had just broken through to the comprehension realm and was only at the initial stage of the comprehension realm. However, facing this elder, Xiao Chun wasn't at a disadvantage. Xiao Chun was unable to fight someone who was of a higher realm than him. However, if they were of the same realm and there was a difference of a few levels between them, Xiao Chun would be able to fight him with his unparalleled combat prowess. At this moment, there were many blood-colored swords surrounding Xiao Chun. Sharp and powerful sword energy spread out. Seeing Xiao Chun surrounded by so many blood-colored swords, the Bloodblade Valley Elder said with a gloomy expression, "Sword body. You actually have a sword body." With one look, he could tell that Xiao Chun had a sword body. Such a body type was one of the top in the Great Thousand Worlds. Moreover, the sword body was the body type that all sword cultivators dreamed of. He seemed to understand why Xiao Chun would become the successor of the heaven-breaking Sword Venerable. So that was the case. The sword body did indeed have such qualifications. Hearing the elder's words, Xiao Chen's expression was calm. A cold glint flashed across his eyes as he said flatly, "It's a little too early to be surprised now." With that, Xiao Chen's mind moved, and countless blood-colored swords flew towards the Bloodblade Valley Elder. After cultivating with Junwia for 20 years, Xiao Chun had basically grasped how to use the sword body. Now, when he used the sword body, its power was much stronger than when he was in Hachiburu's Senkai. Seeing the countless blood-colored swords flying towards him, a fierce look flashed across the Bloodblade Valley Elder's eyes. He then slashed out with his blade and shouted coldly, "Although the sword body is strong, your cultivation is too low. What can you do? Break for me. Begging for your collection, begging for your monthly votes, begging for your recommendation." Chapter 1965. Although the elder of the Bloodblade Valley was shocked by Xiao Chen's sword body, he did not allow himself to be captured. Just as he had said, Xiao Chen's cultivation was only at the entry level of the realm of enlightenment before the sword body was displayed. He swung his blade in an attempt to shatter Xiao Chen's sword images. However, although the elder's attack struck the sword images, it did not shatter them all. The sword physique was indeed extraordinary. In particular, Xiao Chen's grasp over the sword realm was much greater than before. As a result, even though there was a difference in cultivation, it was still very difficult for the elder to gain any advantage over Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun did not lose the upper hand in the clash. The remaining blood-red swords continued to fly towards the elder. To be able to become an elder of the Bloodblade Valley with such strength, it looks like I've overestimated your Bloodblade Valley, Xiao Chun said indifferently as he looked at the elder. A cold light flashed through the elder's eyes when he heard Xiao Chen's words. His face sank as he said, "What arrogance! Shatter!" Being looked down upon by a member of the younger generation, the elder's heart was naturally filled with rage. Immediately after, he slashed out with his blade once again. Finally, he completely shattered the sword shadows that filled the sky before him. However, although the elder had blocked Xiao Chen's attack, it was only a single strike. At that moment, the surroundings of Xiao Chun and the elder were enveloped by the sword realm. Blood-red swords continuously condensed. As mentioned earlier, although the elder had blocked Xiao Chen's attack, it was only a single strike. He was unable to break through Xiao Chen's sword realm. In other words, it was impossible for him to do so with his strength. After breaking through to the comprehension realm, Xiao Chen's strength was much stronger than when he was in the Immortal Emperor realm. Thus, Xiao Chun was not afraid of the elder at all. Once again enveloped by the sword realm, a solemn look flashed across the elder's eyes. Although on the surface, the elder did not seem to be afraid of Xiao Chen's sword realm at all, in his heart, he was indeed very wary of Xiao Chen's sword realm. The sword physique was recognized as one of the strongest physiques in the Great Thousand World. There is no need to doubt this at all. Xiao Chun possessed the sword physique, so his strength naturally made the elder fearful. Xiao Chun did not waste any more words with the elder. He immediately swung his sword and took the initiative to attack the elder. With the support of the sword realm, the power of Xiao Chun's attack was greatly increased. Xiao Chun and the elder, Zhou Song and Lin Gang, Song Xing and Hiying. Everyone was standing together in a pool of blood. For a moment, it was difficult to tell who was the winner. Lin Gang didn't have any advantage in the fight with Zhou Song, but neither did Zhou Song. However, Zhou Song didn't give Lin Gang any time to catch his breath. He had been suppressing Lin Gang all the time. Lin Gang had to be careful in the face of Zhou Song's ferocious attacks. At this moment, Lin Gang sneered as he fought with Zhou Song. "Zhou Song, you and I are equal in strength. It's impossible for you to kill me. Now that the Sword Sect and my Bloodblade Valley are fighting fiercely, what about the other two sides? Have you thought about it?" Lin Gang still felt that the Sword Sect had placed most of their strength on the Bloodblade Valley. In this way, the Sky Sword Sect and the Deceased Demon Sect would be under less pressure. Lin Gang even felt that the Sky Sword Sect and the Deceased Demon Sect might have already reached the foot of the Sword Sect. He thought that the Deceased Demon Sect and the Sky Sword Sect had already broken through the Sword Sect's defensive line. Unfortunately, he was too naive. Just as Lin Gang finished speaking, a voice full of ridicule rang out. "Lin Gang, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed." "Who?" Lin Gang was stunned when he heard this voice. He immediately asked in a deep voice. Following Lin Gang's shout, Lin Qing and Li Ku's figures slowly appeared on the horizon. When he saw Li Ku, Lin Gang was confused at first. However, he was soon overjoyed. Li Ku, haha, it seems that you've already taken care of the sword sect. Lin Gang did not know Lin Qing. When he saw Li Ku appear, Lin Gang naturally thought that Li Ku had come to help him. However, when he heard Lin Gang's words, Lin Qing, who was standing beside Li Ku, laughed disdainfully. You're so silly that you're cute. Lin Qing did not hide his disdain for Lin Gang. When he finished speaking, Lin Qing turned to look at Li Ku and said, Brother Li, this is your chance to show off. Join the sword sect and prove your allegiance. Brother Lin, don't worry. I know what to do. Li Ku smiled faintly when he heard Lin Qing's words. Lin Gang thought that Li Ku had come to help him, but he did not know that this was not the case. Li Ku had come here because he had already decided to join the sword sect. Lin Qing had tried to rope him in before, so Li Ku had finally made his choice. Compared to the heavenly sword sect, just as Lin Qing had said, joining the Sword's Gate was the best choice. Furthermore, the position of the vice sect master of the Sword's Gate was definitely not inferior to that of the sect master of the heavenly sword sect. In fact, the vice sect master might even be stronger. Humans strive for greater heights. Moreover, it was Li Ku's master's wish to merge the Sky Sword sect into the Sword sect. As such, Li Ku naturally had no reason to refuse. When he heard Li Ku's words, Lin Qing smiled faintly. Lin Gang, who was fighting fiercely with Shou Song, frowned slightly. He also felt that something was wrong. This Li Ku did not seem to be here to help him. Then what was he doing here? Moreover, who was the person beside him? Just as Lin Gang was feeling puzzled, Lin Qing laughed coldly and said, Make your move. The moment he said that, an End Realm aura exploded from Lin Qing's body. Feeling this aura, Lin Gang's expression changed, and he couldn't help but exclaim, End Realm cultivation. He didn't expect Lin Qing to be an End Realm expert. However, it was already too late for him to be surprised because Lin Qing had already charged towards He Ying. Lin Gang didn't recognize Lin Qing, but He Ying did. After all, Lin Qing and He Ying could be said to be senior and junior brothers. However, after Lin Qing left the sword sect, He Ying became the vice sect leader of the sword sect. Seeing Lin Qing appear, He Ying's face flashed with shock. Lin Qing, that's right, I'm back in the sword sect. He Ying, I said before that you're a naturally rebellious person. Now, it seemed like I was right. Facing He Ying, Lin Qing sneered coldly. Then, he joined forces with Song Xing to attack He Ying, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1966. Lin Qing sneered as he looked at He Ying. Hearing this, the chill in He Ying's eyes intensified. At the same time, a thought of retreating emerged in his heart. He had no choice. If he was facing Song Xing alone, he would not be afraid at all. This was because Song Xing alone could not do anything to him. Although he could not do anything to Song Xing either, at least his life was not in danger. However, if Lin Qing joined in and the two of them attacked him together, then the situation would be completely different. Lin Qing and Song Xing, the two of them together, were completely capable of killing him. Lin Qing was no stranger to He Ying. Keenly sensing the change in He Ying's expression, Lin Qing did not say anything and directly blocked off He Ying's escape route. Then, he joined forces with Song Xing to attack He Ying. With a thick sneer on his face, Lin Qing said indifferently, He Ying, I know your human form too well. You want to run, right? But I'm afraid you won't have the chance today. Lin Qing could tell at a glance that He Ying was thinking of retreating. Naturally, you would not give He Ying the chance to escape. Hence, without saying anything, he blocked off He Ying's escape route. When he saw Lin Qing's actions, the chill in He Ying's eyes intensified. Lin Qing clearly wanted to kill him right here and now. With the addition of Lin Qing, the pressure on He Ying naturally increased by a lot. Although He Ying could still hold on for the time being, it was obvious that He Ying would not be able to hold on for much longer if the situation continued on like this. Just like Ying, after Lin Qing made his move, Li Ku also immediately attacked Lin Gang. Without any explanation, he joined forces with Zhou Song to deal with Lin Gang. Although Zhou Song did not know about the relationship between Li Ku and Lin Qing, he naturally would not reject Li Ku's offer to help. After all, it was indeed difficult for Zhou Song to take down Lin Gang alone. Now that Li Ku was helping him, Zhou Song saw hope in killing Lin Gang. Zhou Song's confidence was boosted, but Lin Gang was completely different. While facing the combined attacks of Zhou Song and Li Ku, he glared at Li Ku and shouted, "Li Ku, what are you doing? Are you crazy?" Li Ku was supposed to be his ally, but now he was helping Zhou Song to deal with him. This made Lin Gang extremely depressed. In response to Lin Gang's angry shout, Li Ku was extremely calm. "Lin Gang, I have decided to join the Sword Sect. If you know what's good for you, you'd better surrender now. Sect's leader, perhaps the sect leader will spare your life." Li Ku, and chose to join the Sword Sect? Upon hearing these words, Lin Gang was taken aback. However, he quickly became enraged as he shouted, "You traitor!" Lin Gang didn't expect that Li Ku would change sides at the last minute. If that was the case, wouldn't their plan to attack the Sword Gate fail? Not to mention the possibility of failure, it was already extremely difficult for Lin Gang to escape, because Zhou Song and Li Ku were both entangled with him, giving him no chance to escape. Hearing that Li Ku had joined the Sword Sect, Zhou Song's lips curled into a smile. He vaguely guessed that this was Lin Qing's doing. Not bad, not bad. The Sword Sect now has another End Realm expert. He did not doubt Li Ku's words. Li Ku and Lin Gang were clearly not holding back at all. Li Ku really wanted to kill Lin Gang. Just like Lin Qing said, this was Li Ku's proof of joining the Sword Sect. With Li Ku's help, Zhou Song's confidence was greatly boosted. He thought that no matter what, he had to kill Lin Gang here today. Thinking of this, Zhou Song's attacks became even more ferocious. With the addition of Li Ku and Lin Qing, the situation was completely reversed. Originally, He Ying and Lin Gang were evenly matched against Song Xing and Zhou Song. But now, with the arrival of Lin Qing and Li Ku, the balance was completely broken. Lin Gang and He Ying were not afraid of one-on-one. But one against two, the situation was completely different. Moreover, Lin Qing and Li Ku's strength was not weaker than Lin Gang and He Ying's. All of a sudden, the situation was completely reversed. Lin Gang and He Ying were completely suppressed. As a result, the morale of the Swords Gate's side naturally rose. As for the Bloodblade Valley side, their morale was clearly much weaker. There was nothing they could do. Looking at Lin Gang and He Ying, they were completely suppressed and could only bitterly hold on. Even their own sect leader was in such a state. How could the people below have any fighting spirit? Xiao Chun was still engaged in a fierce battle with the elder of the Bloodblade Valley. However, the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Lin Qing and Li Ku's appearance made Xiao Chun unconsciously happy. It seemed that he would definitely win today. Moreover, Lin Gang and He Ying also had a very high chance of killing the two of them. Of course, what made Xiao Chun the happiest wasn't this. Xiao Chun had heard the conversation between Lin Qing and Li Ku. It was obvious that Li Ku had chosen to join the Sword Sect. What made Xiao Chun happy was that Li Ku had joined. He was an End Realm expert. With him joining the Sword Sect, there was no doubt that the strength of the Sword Sect would increase by a lot. As a result, the Sword Sect had 5 End Realm experts. Even compared to the Black Emperor sect, they weren't any weaker. After all, the Black Emperor sect also only had 5 End Realm experts. Moreover, the Sword Sect had 8 Dao Realm experts, which were sword heads. They had even more than the Black Emperor sect. They completely had the ability to charge into the top powers. This was naturally what Xiao Chun was happy about. Of course, Xiao Chun didn't know that Li Ku joining the Sword Sect wasn't just a small benefit. Apart from Li Ku himself being an End Realm expert, the entire Sky Sword Sect also joined the Sword Sect. Even Wuzhou, which was controlled by the Sky Sword Sect, would belong to the Sword Sect from today onwards. With Wuzhou, the Sword Sect will be able to dominate 2 states. With that, they will be able to obtain more resources. The more resources they had, the better it would be for the development of the sect. There was no doubt about that. One could say that Lin Qing being able to persuade Li Ku to join the sword sect was a huge contribution. It played a huge role in the growth of the sword sect's strength. Xiao Chun was delighted. However, the elder who was fighting against Xiao Chun had an ashen face. It was like he could already see the destruction of Bloodblade Valley. After all, Lin Gang and He Ying were surrounded. Looking at the current situation, it was only a matter of time before they lost. Once Lin Qing, Zhou Song, Song Xing, and Li Ku were free, it would be a disaster for the people of Bloodblade Valley. Who would be able to block for End Realm experts? Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1967. Lin Gang and He Ying were currently facing the combined attacks of Song Xing, Zhou Song, Lin Qing, and Li Ku for End Realm experts. If this continued, Lin Gang and He Ying's defeat was almost certain. 2 against 1. This advantage was already incomparably huge. The battle continued, and Xiao Chun relied on the power of the Sword Realm to gradually suppress the Bloodblade Valley Elder in front of him. Being suppressed by Xiao Chun, although the Elder tried his best to resist, he was still unable to change anything. He tried his best to resist Xiao Chen's attacks, but Xiao Chen's attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer. The Elder's injuries were getting worse and worse, and it seemed like he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Such a battle naturally wouldn't end in a short period of time. Thus, for an entire day and night, the Sword Province could feel the aftermath of the battle between the Sword Sect and the Bloodblade Valley, as well as the Demon-Slaying Sect. After fighting intensely for an entire day and night, Xiao Chun relied on the position of the Sword Realm to finally kill this Bloodblade Valley Elder. In a one-on-one battle, and in a situation where his cultivation was lower, Xiao Chun was able to kill a Comprehension Realm expert. This was indeed not easy. At the same time, it also displayed Xiao Chen's heaven-defying combat strength against those of the same realm. From the overall situation, Xiao Chun killing an elder of the Bloodblade Valley didn't have much of an effect. However, Xiao Chun was able to kill a Comprehension Realm expert, which indeed made Xiao Chun very happy. This was because this was the first time Xiao Chun had killed a Comprehension Realm expert. However, after killing this Bloodblade Valley elder, Xiao Chun had expended a lot of energy and didn't choose to continue attacking. In fact, at this point in the battle, it wasn't important whether Xiao Chun attacked or not. The outcome of the battle was basically determined. Other than Lin Gang and He Ying, who were still stubbornly resisting, the other experts of the Bloodblade Valley were either dead or injured. They were completely suppressed by the Sword Sect. The experts of the Sword Sect, led by Yang Song and the others, had completely suppressed the Bloodblade Valley. At the same time, the Vice Valley Master of the Bloodblade Valley, a Dao Realm expert, had also been killed by Yang Song. As the experts of the Bloodblade Valley fell one after another, the outcome was set. Only Lin Gang and He Ying were left. However, even for Lin Gang and He Ying, after a day and night of intense battle, they were also facing the combined attacks of 4 End Realm experts. Their situation was already extremely bad. With such a situation, even as an End Realm expert with thick life energy, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. It was obviously impossible to kill an End Realm expert in one strike. One could only slowly wear them down and use up their life energy. Only then would one have a chance to kill an End Realm expert. Lin Gang and He Ying were in such a situation. The life energy in their bodies was constantly being used up. Once their life energy was used up, their outcome was obvious. They could also feel that the two of them were reaching their limits. As such, Song Xing, Zhou Song, Lin Qing, and Li Ku didn't waste this opportunity. Their attacks became more and more ferocious. They couldn't hold on and couldn't find a way to escape. Last time, He Ying was able to escape from the Sword Sect because he had a space compass on him. Unfortunately, that space compass had been used up. He Ying didn't have a second space compass on him. Without a space compass, it was almost impossible to escape from Song Xing's hands. Furthermore, Song Xing had already suffered once. How could he give He Ying such a chance again? As such, Song Shing had been blocking He Ying's path of retreat, not giving He Ying any chance to escape. This made He Ying extremely angry. While blocking Song Shing and Lin Qing's attacks, He Ying shouted coldly, "Song Shing, are you really going to be so ruthless? No matter what, you and I were comrades in the past. Do you really have to kill me?" Comrades? He Ying, you're just a traitor of the sword sect. What comrades? Today, you will die. Facing He Ying's angry shout, Song Shing didn't care at all. In the past, Song Shing did not think that he and He Ying had any feelings for each other. Not to mention that He Ying had already betrayed the sword sect. Even in the past, when the two of them were still vice sect leaders of the sword sect, Song Shing and He Ying could be described as fire and water. At that time, He Ying was bent on becoming the sect leader of the sword sect. Song Shing felt that the position of sect leader of the sword sect could only be taken by the successor of the heaven-breaking sword sage. Therefore, the two of them were fighting openly and secretly. Neither of them was willing to back down. Their relationship had never been harmonious. Therefore, it was impossible for He Ying to use their friendship to move Song Shing, seeing that Song Shing had no intention of holding back, and the murderous intent in his eyes grew stronger as time passed. He Ying gritted his teeth. His heart was filled with unwillingness, but his body was almost at its limit. He Ying felt powerless. Not giving He Ying any time to catch his breath, Song Shing and Lin Qing tightly entangled He Ying, each wave of attacks stronger than the last. Just as He Ying found it increasingly difficult to defend against Song Shing and Lin Qing's attacks, on the other side, Lin Gang suddenly let out a scream. Zhou Song's fist landed on Lin Gang's chest. A terrifying wave of spiritual energy instantly exploded and entered Lin Gang's body, breaking his heart. Just like He Ying, Lin Gang had also reached his limit. Zhou Song accurately took advantage of Lin Gang's momentary lapse in concentration and immediately lashed out with a punch, before he viciously punched Lin Gang's chest. If it were anyone else, they would have died on the spot. However, Lin Gang was an End Realm expert after all. After his heart was broken, he didn't die on the spot. However, he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Then his aura instantly weakened. His face was pale, and his aura was weak. Lin Gang looked at Zhou Song in front of him. A deep sense of unwillingness flashed across his eyes. He didn't expect that he would die here. Just a day ago, Lin Gang was still full of confidence that he would be able to take down the sword sect. However, in just a short day, Lin Gang was about to die in Jinzhou. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something. However, before he could speak, a long sword pierced through his throat from behind. Li Ku had appeared behind Lin Gang out of nowhere, stabbing his sword into Lin Gang's throat. Lin Gang wanted to say something, but because his throat was pierced, he couldn't say a single word. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1968. Lin Gang died. First, his heart was shattered by Zhou Song's fist. Then, his throat was pierced by Li Ku's sword. Before he died, Lin Gang turned his head and looked at Li Ku unwillingly. Maybe he didn't expect that he would be killed immediately. Originally, Li Ku was supposed to be his ally, but he was persuaded by Lin Qing and turned to the Sword Gate. It was also because of this that the Blood Saber Valley had failed and he had died. There was no doubt that Lin Gang knew what his death meant to the Blood Knife Valley. Perhaps it would not be long before the Blood Knife Valley was removed from the Great Thousand World. From then on, the Blood Knife Valley would cease to exist in the Great Thousand World. He didn't dare to, but he had no choice. Lin Gang's consciousness became more and more blurry. In the end, his life was cut off, and he died unwillingly. One could easily imagine the impact of Lin Gang's death on the Bloodblade Valley. Upon seeing this scene, the Bloodblade Valley members, who were still stubbornly resisting, completely lost their will to fight. There were even some who began to secretly flee. The defeat was like a landslide. As the Bloodblade Valley members fled, the Sword Sect members chased them down. With that, the Bloodblade Valley, which was already on the verge of defeat, was completely defeated. Lin Gang's death was the last straw that broke the Bloodblade Valley's back. They no longer had the strength to fight the sword sect. Probably not many of the Bloodblade Valley experts present would be able to escape. Looking at the scene in front of him, Ying knew that it was over. The Bloodblade Valley was finished, and so was he. This was because after killing Lin Gang, Zhou Song and Li Ku arrived in front of Ying. The four End Realm experts blocked off all of Ying's paths of retreat. Ying had no way out and was already at his limit. Now that he was facing four End Realm experts, he didn't have any chance at all. A self-mocking smile appeared on his face. Ying also gave up on resisting. His gaze swept across Zhou Song and the others before landing on Song Xing. He said in a low voice, "Since things have already reached this stage, the winner takes all. I have nothing to say." Facing four End Realm experts at the same time, Ying naturally knew the outcome, which was why there was no need to continue fighting. Hearing this, Song Xing didn't reply. He just looked at Ying indifferently. Under the gazes of Song Xing and the other three, Ying turned his gaze to Xiao Chun. A strange glint flashed in his eyes as he shouted, "Xiao Chun, I do admire you for allowing the sword sect to grow to such an extent in such a short period of time. However, I, Ying, still do not recognize you as the sect master because you don't have the right." Without waiting for Xiao Chen's reply, Ying secretly circulated the spiritual energy in his body and forcefully severed his 8 extraordinary meridians. After spitting out a mouthful of fresh blood, Ying's face turned pale. Then his entire body fell straight to the ground. Even though he knew that he had no chance, Ying wasn't willing to be captured alive. Since he had already betrayed the sword sect, now that Bloodblade Valley was defeated and Lin Gang was killed, there was only one outcome for him, which was death. Rather than dying in the hands of Xiao Chun, why not kill himself? That way, Ying could still keep his last bit of dignity. Seeing Ying kill himself, Xiao Chun also came to Song Xing's side. He looked calmly at Ying's corpse. Xiao Chen's face didn't show much emotion. Although Ying didn't admit that he was the sect master, this wasn't important to Xiao Chun. Whether Ying admitted it or not, it didn't matter. Ying died, but Xiao Chun didn't feel any joy or sadness. He didn't feel happy because he killed this traitor, nor did he feel pity because Ying was an End Realm expert. Since they were not on the same side, it was naturally impossible for them to walk together. Therefore, Xiao Chun did not feel anything special about Ying's death. At most, he decided inwardly. After all, Ying was once the deputy lord of the Sword Gate. That was all. Looking deeply at Ying, Xiao Chun said to Song Xing and Zhou Song, "I'll leave the rest to you guys." Yes. Hearing this, Song Xing and Zhou Song respectfully nodded. Since the Bloodblade Valley was defeated, Xiao Chun left the rest to Song Xing and Zhou Song. Then, Xiao Chun turned to look at Li Ku. In terms of cultivation, Li Ku definitely wouldn't place Xiao Chun in his eyes. However, facing Xiao Chen's gaze, for some reason, Li Ku couldn't help but feel nervous. Maybe this was Xiao Chen's identity. After all, although Xiao Chun was only at the Enlightenment realm, in terms of identity, Xiao Chun was the sect master of the sword sect. He wasn't someone Li Ku could offend. Hence, out of instinct, Li Ku took the initiative to bow to Xiao Chun. Li Ku greets sect master. As an End Realm expert, Li Ku actually took the initiative to bow to Xiao Chun. What Li Ku didn't expect was that he didn't seem to have any resistance to bowing to Xiao Chun. This was the benefit of his identity. Facing Li Ku's bow, Xiao Chun didn't act arrogant at all. He personally helped Li Ku up. Xiao Chun smiled and said, "Senior Li Ku, there's no need to be so polite." Although Li Ku joined the sword sect, he was still an End Realm expert. Hence, Xiao Chun still gave him face. Facing Xiao Chen's warmth, Li Ku finally heaved a sigh of relief. Before, he was really afraid that Xiao Chun wouldn't accept him. One must know that even the Bloodblade Valley was destroyed. With the strength of the sword sect, it wouldn't be too difficult for them to destroy the Sky Sword sect. In fact, it would be very simple. However, from the looks of it, Xiao Chun obviously didn't have such thoughts. After helping Li Ku up, Xiao Chun and the other two stood in the air. Then, Lin Xing roughly explained the situation to Xiao Chun. After hearing that Li Ku had decided to lead the Sky Sword Sect to join the Sword Sect, Xiao Chun smiled and said to Li Ku, "Senior Li Ku, I believe that you won't regret your decision today. The Sword Sect welcomes you." Xiao Chun didn't hesitate to agree to Li Ku and the rest of the Sky Sword Sect joining. After all, only a fool would reject such a thing. Besides, Li Ku had shown enough sincerity by killing Lin Gang himself. Just as Lin Qing said, Li Ku had shown his sincerity to Xiao Chun and proved his sincerity. So, Xiao Chun naturally would not refuse. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Li Ku once again cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, sect leader." Okay, let's go back first. We'll leave the rest to Senior Tsang Xing and second senior brother. There shouldn't be any problems. After all, there's only the deceased demon sect left. They won't be able to do much. Hearing this, Xiao Chun laughed out loud, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1969. The Sky Sword Sect had surrendered and the Bloodblade Valley had been destroyed. Now, the three sects had joined forces to attack the Sword Sect. Only the deceased demon sect was left holding on bitterly. With the deceased demon sect strength, they naturally didn't pose much of a threat to the Sword Sect. After all, the deceased demon sect only had one End Realm expert, the Blood Demon Old Man. Compared to the Sword Sect, the deceased demon sect was too weak. The following matters would be handled by Tsang Xing and Zhou Song. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Lin Qing and Li Ku didn't have any objections. Then, the group directly returned to the Sword Sect. The matter of the Sky Sword Sect surrender was handled by Lin Qing and Li Ku, so there was nothing to worry about. Of course, they still had to take over Wuzhou. After all, since the Sky Sword Sect had surrendered, then Wuzhou would naturally be under the influence of the Sword Sect. Xiao Chun returned to the Sword Sect. As for the deceased demon sect, after a day and night of battle, the deceased demon sect had suffered heavy casualties. The Blood Demon Old Man and Wu Huan had also fought fiercely for an entire day. After a day of battle, the Blood Demon Old Man was extremely confused. It had been so long, but why was there still no news from the Bloodblade Valley and the Sky Sword Sect? His heart was filled with doubts. But because the Blood Demon Old Man only had one End Realm expert, Wu Huan, in front of him, he could still hold on. To put it bluntly, Wu Huan's strength was actually on par with the Blood Demon Old Man. The two of them couldn't do anything to each other. In a one-on-one situation, whether it was Wu Huan or the Blood Demon Old Man, it wouldn't be an easy task to kill the other. The two of them had expended a lot of energy. However, at this moment, Tsang Xing and Zhou Song finally brought people over. After dealing with the Bloodblade Valley matter, Tsang Xing and Zhou Song brought a portion of the Sword Sect experts over. Seeing the two of them appear, the Blood Demon Old Man's expression instantly changed. Wu Huan, on the other hand, revealed a relieved smile. "If you guys didn't come, I would have died from exhaustion." Looking at Tsang Xing and Zhou Song, Wu Huan said with a smile. After fighting one-on-one with the Blood Demon Old Man for more than a day, Wu Huan was indeed exhausted. Fortunately, Tsang Xing and Zhou Song had finally arrived. Tsang Xing and Zhou Song led the Sword Sect experts. At the thought of this, the Blood Demon Old Man was extremely furious. At the same time, he was also extremely puzzled. One must know that the Sword Gate had no advantage against the three great sections. How could they have defeated the Bloodblade Valley and the Heavenly Sword Sect? The Blood Demon Old Man naturally didn't know that Li Ku and the Sky Sword Sect had already surrendered to the Sword Sect. He didn't care about the ugly expression on his face. Tsang Xing and Zhou Song came to Wu Huan's side. Zhou Song smiled and said, "Look at you. Aren't you still full of energy? Cut the crap. How's the Blood Demon Old Man?" Wu Huan replied snappily, "It's already settled. Only the deceased demon sect is left," Zhou Song said. The Blood Demon Sect and the Sky Sword Sect had already been settled. Now, only the deceased demon sect was still bitterly holding on. Hearing Zhou Song's words, Wu Huan sneered. "Then let's do it. Let's settle the matter here as soon as possible." Only the deceased Devil Sect was left struggling to hold on. With this, the outcome was set. Following Wu Huan's words, Zhou Song and Song Xing attacked at the same time, attacking the blood demon old man. At the same time, the experts of the sword gate who came with Song Xing and Zhou Song also attacked the people of the deceased devil sect. With Zhou Song, Song Xing, and the experts of the sword sect joining in, the situation was completely reversed. Just the deceased demon sect alone couldn't stop the sword sect, especially the blood demon old man. He had already fought with Wu Huan for more than a day. Now, he had to face the combined attacks of 3 end realm experts. Very quickly, the blood demon old man was heavily injured by Zhou Song. Fighting 1 against 3, it could only be said that the blood demon old man was struggling at death's door. It was only a matter of time before he lost. While resisting with all his might, the blood demon old man complained in his heart. At the same time, he had a deep suspicion. He really couldn't understand why the Bloodblade Valley and the Sky Sword sect would lose. This was completely different from what he had expected. One must know that when the 3 sects joined forces, they had made a detailed plan. It shouldn't have been like this. It was impossible for him to be a match for Song Xing and the others. The injuries on his body became more and more serious. After a fierce battle, the blood demon old man finally couldn't take it anymore and begged for mercy. This old man surrenders. The blood demon old man knew that he wasn't a match for the 3 of them. Moreover, the deceased demon sect had suffered heavy casualties under the massacre of the experts of the sword sect. Therefore, the blood demon old man chose to surrender. Unfortunately, after hearing the blood demon old man's words, Song Xing and the others didn't have any intention of stopping. Wu Huan even sneered. Surrender? Do you think that's possible now? Blood demon old man, today is the day you fall. The blood demon old man was different from Li Ke. Therefore, in the face of his surrender, Wu Huan and the others naturally wouldn't agree. This old man would never sincerely surrender to the sword sect. Therefore, it was better to kill him. Wu Huan and the others attacked even more fiercely. In the end, even though the blood demon old man was extremely unwilling, he was still killed by Wu Huan and the others. With the fall of the blood demon old man, the experts of the deceased demon sect naturally lost their fighting spirit. What followed was another merciless massacre. At this point, the plan of the 3 sects to join forces to attack the sword sect was completely destroyed. The sword sect could also be said to have completely defeated the 3 sections. They had successfully resolved this crisis. This outcome was something that many forces in the Great Thousand World didn't expect. Originally, when the 3 sects joined forces to attack the sword sect, many forces in the Great Thousand World felt that the sword sect would definitely be in danger this time. However, who would have thought that the sword sect would actually win in the end? Moreover, it was a complete victory. In one fell swoop, they destroyed the attack of the 3 sections. The combat strength that the sword sect displayed in this battle shocked many forces in the Great Thousand World. At the same time, they probably had to reevaluate the overall strength of the sword sect. The sword sect's strength was getting stronger and stronger. Regarding this, the Black Emperor sect was undoubtedly the most unwilling to see this happen. In this battle, the Black Emperor sect specially sent spies to the sword sect. Now, following the complete victory of the sword sect, a few of the spies from the Black Emperor sect side helplessly as they passed the news back to the Black Emperor sect. The sword sect threat is getting bigger and bigger. If Sect Master still wants to attack the sword sect, I'm afraid it won't be an easy task. Yes, I didn't expect that even Li Ke would surrender to the sword sect. There's also that Lin Qing, 6 End Realm experts, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1970. The few spies of the Black Emperor sect gathered together and sighed helplessly. One must know that the sword sect and the Bazho were right next to each other. The stronger the sword sect was, the more pressure the Black Emperor sect would face. Moreover, the Black Emperor sect had never given up on swallowing the sword sect. However, it seemed like it would be difficult for them to take down the sword sect. That's right, 6 End Realm experts, 8 Dao Realm experts. Along with the surrender of the Sky Sword Sect, the number of sword heads in the Sword Sect can probably exceed 10. The current Sword Sect already has the strength of a top power. The leading Black Emperor Sect Elder sighed helplessly. 6 Dao Realm experts and 10 Dao Realm experts. In terms of strength, the current Swords Gate was already on par with the Black Emperor Sect. In fact, in terms of Dao Realm experts, the Swords Gate even surpassed the Black Emperor Sect. In this way, if the Black Emperor Sect wanted to take down the Swords Gate, it would no longer be a matter of how much they had to pay. It was basically impossible, because the Swords Gate already had the strength to not fear the Black Emperor Sect. If the two sects were to fight again, it would be hard to say who would emerge victorious. Furthermore, with the surrender of the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Sword Gate had also obtained the land of the Wu State. In this way, the Sword Gate was equivalent to dominating the land of two states, and the various resources they could obtain would be at least twice as much as before. The few Black Emperor Sect spies were shocked. On the other side, within the Bazho Black Emperor Sect main hall, he sat on the main seat. Below him were Zhao Chunfeng and the other higher-ups. Pretty much all the higher-ups of the Black Emperor Sect were gathered together. However, at this moment, their expressions weren't too good. After keeping silent for a moment, He Sui was the first to speak. The Sword Sect obtained a huge victory. The Sky Sword Sect surrendered, and Lin Qing also joined the Sword Sect. In a short 10 years, the Sword Sect isn't what it used to be. The current Sword Gate already has 6 End Realm experts and 10 Sword Head level Dao Realm experts. Their strength isn't weaker than our Black Emperor Sect. As he spoke, anger and helplessness surfaced in He Sui's heart. Thinking about it, it made sense. He was clearly a piece of fat meat at the edge of his mouth, but in the blink of an eye, he actually had the strength to contend against the Black Emperor Sect. This made He Sui somewhat unable to accept it for a moment. Hearing He Sui's words, the upper echelons of the Black Emperor Sect below were also extremely furious. However, at the same time, they were extremely helpless because all of this had already become a fact, and the Black Emperor Sect could not change it. Everyone went silent. Seeing this, He Sui sighed and said, "Now, it's already impossible to take down the Sword Sect, and the Sword Sect might become the 6th great power. What do all of you think our Black Emperor Sect should do to the Sword Sect?" With the strength of the Sword Sect, the neighboring Black Emperor Sect naturally had to change their attitude towards the Sword Sect. After all, the two sects were very close to each other, so it was time for this relationship to change. Hearing He Sui's words, Zhao Qinfeng and the other 3 Black Emperor Sect princes knew what He Sui wanted to say. Actually, when he received the news, He Sui already had an answer in his heart. The Sword Sect had become really strong, and He Sui also knew that the best choice for the Black Emperor Sect was to change their attitude and coexist peacefully with the Sword Sect. If not, it wouldn't be good for anyone. He sighed in his heart. The foundations of the Sword Sect were indeed shocking. Think about it. If the Sword Sect didn't have such a deep foundation, they definitely wouldn't have been able to grow so much in such a short time. No one replied, and He Sui didn't speak either. After sighing in his heart, He Sui said helplessly, "Zhao Chunfeng, make a trip to the Sword Sect and congratulate them." He Sui sent one of the 4 Black Emperor Sect princes, Tiger King Zhao Chunfeng, to personally congratulate the Sword Sect. To put it bluntly, he was telling Shao Chun that the Black Emperor Sect was willing to coexist peacefully with the Sword Sect in the future. They had completely changed their attitude towards the Sword Sect. Although Zhao Qinfeng was unwilling to do so, he knew that this was the best choice. He nodded helplessly and said in a low voice, "Yes." Being forced to change their attitude towards the Sword Sect, the higher-ups of the Black Emperor Sect were helpless, but there was nothing they could do. The Black Emperor Sect had no choice but to accept the fact that the Sword Sect had risen, and the other sects were the same. The strength that the Sword Sect had displayed in this battle had made many forces in the Great Thousand World look at them in a new light, especially the 5 super first-rate forces. They had already placed the Sword Sect on an equal footing. Moreover, The 5 super first-rate forces had already seen the Sword Sect as the 6th super first-rate force. This didn't mean that they thought too highly of the Sword Sect, but the Sword Sect's strength had indeed entered the level of a super first-rate force. They believed that it wouldn't be long before the Sword Sect became the 6th super first-rate force in the Great Thousand World. Xiao Chun didn't care too much about the thoughts of the other sections. After the battle, Xiao Chun immediately made arrangements for everyone in the Sky Sword Sect. Of course, for those disciples who didn't meet the requirements, Xiao Chun only made them odd-job disciples in the Sword Sect. After all, if the Sword Sect wanted to develop, it naturally couldn't be without a bottom line. Xiao Chun couldn't make those who weren't talented enough official disciples in the Sword Sect. He could only make them odd-job disciples, and this was because of Li Ku. After making arrangements for everyone in the Sky Sword Sect, Xiao Chun appointed Li Ku as the deputy sect master of the Sword Sect. The previous 2 Dao Realm deputy sect masters of the Sword Sect were the sword heads of the Sword Sect. Just as Lin Qing had said, Xiao Chun didn't treat Li Ku unfairly, and this made Li Ku feel touched. 6 deputy sect masters and 10 sword heads. This was the current strength of the Sword Sect, and it wasn't any weaker than the Black Emperor sect. At the same time, as the Sword Sect revealed its strength in half a month, the Sword Sect once again announced that the Sword Sect had been promoted to a super first-rate force, becoming the 6th super first-rate force in the Great Thousand World. No one in the Great Thousand World objected to the Sword Sect's promotion because the Sword Sect indeed had the strength to do so. Not only did the ordinary forces not object, but even the Black Emperor sect and the other 5 super first-rate forces did not object at all. The Black Emperor sect and the other super first-rate forces even expressed their congratulations to the Sword's Gate for becoming a super first-rate force. They even sent people to congratulate the Sword's Gate. The Black Emperor sect's Zhao Chanfeng represented the Black Emperor sect to pay a visit to the Sword's Gate. This was undoubtedly to let everyone know that the Sword's Gate's promotion to a super first-rate force was already set in stone. Even the Black Emperor sect didn't have the slightest objection. At the foot of the Sword Sect, Zhao Chanfeng and several experts from the Black Emperor sect walked slowly. They didn't fly directly to the Sword Sect, but chose to walk up, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1971. In the past, no matter who came to the Sword Sect, they would definitely fly directly to the Sword Sect. It was impossible for them to walk up from the foot of the mountain. Even ordinary elders of the Black Emperor sect wouldn't do that. However, this time, Zhao Chanfeng brought the people of the Black Emperor sect all the way to the foot of the Sword Sect. As one of the 4 great princes of the Black Emperor sect and a true End Realm expert, Zhao Chanfeng had obediently paid a visit. This was enough to prove that the Black Emperor sect's attitude towards the Sword Sect had changed. Although the experts of the Black Emperor sect who followed behind Zhao Chanfeng felt uncomfortable in their hearts, they didn't dare complain in the slightest. They weren't stupid. They knew that the Sword Sect was no longer the Sword Sect of the past. If they still dared to fly directly above the Sword Sect, there is no doubt that the experts of the Sword Sect would immediately kill them. One must know that the current Sword Sect didn't fear the Black Emperor sect at all. Moreover, even if the experts of the Sword Sect killed them, the Black Emperor sect wouldn't start a war with the Sword Sect. Therefore, when it was time to be honest, it was better to be honest. They arrived at the entrance of the Sword Sect. At this moment, there were 4 disciples guarding the entrance. When they saw Zhao Chanfeng bringing people over, the 4 disciples immediately blocked their path. Zhao Chanfeng didn't make things difficult for them and said indifferently, "Black Emperor sect's Tiger King, Zhao Chanfeng, is here to pay his respects to sect leader Xiao Chun." Hearing Zhao Chanfeng's words, the 4 disciples were first stunned. However, they quickly revealed a nervous expression. At the same time, they respectfully said to Zhao Chanfeng, "Greetings, Tiger King." Although Zhao Chanfeng appeared polite, how could the 4 disciples resist the pressure that Zhao Chanfeng unconsciously emitted? Not to mention, Zhao Chanfeng's identity was enough for these disciples to look up to. Therefore, after knowing Zhao Chunfeng's identity, the four disciples respectfully bowed. Their attitude was simply respectful to the extreme. Zhao Chunfeng's visit was quickly reported by someone. After that, Songxing personally came to welcome Zhao Chunfeng. At the mountain gate, Songxing appeared in front of Zhao Chunfeng in a mere 100 breaths of time. Following the appearance of Songxing, the Four Sword Sect disciples secretly heaved a sigh of relief. There was nothing they could do about it. Previously, when they faced Zhao Chunfeng, the four disciples almost felt suffocated. Now that Songxing had appeared, the four of them were greatly relieved. He bowed respectfully to Songxing and said, "Greetings, Deputy Sect Master." Facing the four people's greetings, Songxing nodded slightly. At the same time, he strode in front of Zhao Chunfeng and laughed loudly. "Brother Zhao, what wind blew you here today?" Zhao Chunfeng walked up the mountain, introduced himself, and even waited here for Songxing to arrive. Without a doubt, he had already given the Sword Sect enough face. As such, Songxing naturally wouldn't offend Zhao Chunfeng for no reason. Since the other party had given him face, Songxing naturally had to treat him warmly. Songxing took the initiative to smile and said enthusiastically. After saying that, Songxing turned his head to look at the four disciples and said, "You guys are simply ridiculous. Don't you know etiquette when the Tiger King arrives? You actually made the Tiger King wait outside the mountain gate." Humph. The four disciples were indeed scared out of their wits, so they didn't care about being rude at all. Now that they were scolded by Songxing, the four of them lowered their heads and didn't dare to speak. Of course, Songxing's scolding was just for show for Zhao Chunfeng. After all, it was indeed a little inappropriate to leave Zhao Chunfeng outside the mountain gate. In fact, it could even be said that it was a little too much. Songxing's scolding was also considered giving face to Zhao Chunfeng. Regarding this, Zhao Chunfeng also smiled and said, "Songxing, don't scold them. It's just a small matter, don't take it to heart." Zhao Chunfeng took the initiative to speak up for the four disciples. Hearing this, Songxing also rode his donkey down the slope and replied with a smile. "Brother Zhao, please forgive me. It's my Sword Sect's fault for not disciplining them properly. Come, let's not talk about this anymore. It's rare for Brother Zhao to come here. Today, you and I must not return until we're drunk. Speaking of which, we haven't drunk together for 100 years." Songxing and Zhao Chunfeng knew each other before. There was nothing strange about this. Moreover, the two of them had a good relationship before. However, with the decline of the Sword Sect, the Black Emperor sect wanted to annex the Sword Sect. As a result, the two of them gradually lost contact with each other. Now, because of the rise of the Sword Sect, the Black Emperor sect knew that it was impossible to annex the Sword Sect. The best way was to get along well with each other. As a result, Songxing and Zhao Chunfeng had another chance to drink together. Songxing personally brought Zhao Chunfeng into the Sword Sect. After settling down the experts of the Black Emperor sect behind Zhao Chunfeng, Songxing pulled Zhao Chunfeng to his cave to drink. In Songxing's cave, Zhao Chunfeng and Lin Qing were sitting in a pavilion in the courtyard. They personally poured a cup of wine for Zhao Chunfeng. Songxing said with a smile, "Brother Zhao, let me introduce you. This is Brother Lin Qing. Like me, he is also one of the vice sect masters of the Sword Sect." Lin Qing and Zhao Chunfeng had met before, but they weren't familiar with each other. Therefore, Songxing only gave a simple introduction. Hearing this, Zhao Chunfeng smiled and took the initiative to greet him. "So it's Brother Lin. Brother Zhao, there's no need to be so courteous. I've long heard of the Tiger King's fame. It's my honor to meet you today. Cheers." Hearing Zhao Chunfeng's words, Lin Qing smiled and raised his cup, draining it in one gulp. Songxing and Lin Qing warmly welcomed Zhao Chunfeng. However, from the beginning to the end, Xiao Chun didn't show up. Not showing up didn't mean that Xiao Chun didn't know that Zhao Chunfeng was coming. Rather, Xiao Chun didn't plan to meet Zhao Chunfeng immediately. After all, the strength of the Sword Sect was extraordinary. As the sect master, no matter what Xiao Chun did, he had to consider the Sword Sect. It could even be said that Xiao Qin's every action represented the entire sword sect. As a result, many things couldn't be handled as simply as before. Take Zhao Chunfeng's matter, for example. As one of the four great princes of the Black Emperor sect, although his status was high, it was only on par with Song Xing and the other vice sect masters. Since Xiao Chen was the sect master of the sword sect, how could Xiao Chen immediately appear to welcome Zhao Chunfeng? Think about it. If Zhao Chunfeng had just appeared in the sword sect and Xiao Chen had personally come out to welcome him, what would the world think of this? As the sect master of the sword sect, he actually immediately went to welcome a prince. Didn't this mean that the sword sect was still afraid of the Black Emperor sect? After all, in terms of status, Song Xing was a level lower than Xiao Chen. Of course, if the sect master of the Black Emperor sect, He Sui, personally came, then Xiao Chen would definitely personally welcome him. After all, the two of them had equal status. Moreover, if He Sui personally came, Xiao Chen still had Song Xing personally come out to welcome him. To put it bluntly, this was not giving the Black Emperor sect any face. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1972. Xiao Chen didn't show up immediately. It wasn't because he was putting on airs or anything, but because the sword sect wanted to express their attitude towards the Black Emperor sect. In the cave, Xiao Chen was cultivating alone. Tomorrow, Xiao Chen would go back to see Zhao Chunfeng. Tonight, he would let Song Xing and Lin Qing deal with it. Song Xing, Lin Qing, and Zhao Chunfeng drank until late at night. In the end, Zhao Chunfeng even stayed in Song Xing's cave. This could be considered giving Zhao Chunfeng face. As for why Xiao Chen didn't show up today, Zhao Chunfeng was very clear in his heart, so he didn't ask much. He understood that the relationship between the Black Emperor sect and the sword sect had changed. If it was said that both sides were in a state of strength before, then now, the sword sect and the Black Emperor sect were on equal footing. Neither side was afraid of the other. Of course, neither side wanted to start a war. As a result, both sides were on equal footing. And since they were on equal footing, then, as the sect master of the sword sect, Xiao Chen naturally wasn't someone that Zhao Chunfeng could meet. After all, Zhao Chunfeng was only one of the four great princes of the Black Emperor sect. He wasn't the sect master of the Black Emperor sect. His status wasn't on the same level as Xiao Chen. His mentality had already changed. He couldn't treat the sword sect with the same attitude as before. That method wouldn't work anymore. After a night of silence, around noon the next day, Xiao Chen met Zhao Chunfeng in the sword sect's main hall. Sitting on the main seat, Zhao Chunfeng took the initiative to bow when he saw Xiao Chen. "Greetings, sect master Xiao Chen. Tiger King, there's no need to be so polite. Please take a seat." Hearing this, Xiao Chen said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. After Zhao Chunfeng took his seat, Xiao Chen said, "Tiger King, what brings you to the sword sect?" "The sword sect has been promoted to a first-rate force. This time, I am here on Sect Master He Sui's orders to congratulate you. At the same time, I also wish to send Sect Master He Sui's regards to Sect Master Xiao Chen." Sect Master He Sui said that he hopes that the sword sect and the Black Emperor sect can become friends. Hearing Xiao Chen's question, Zhao Chunfeng honestly replied. Zhao Chunfeng had indeed come here to express his goodwill to the sword sect. He also hoped that the sword sect and the Black Emperor sect could become friends in the future. After all, the two sects were so close to each other. Once they started fighting, the one who would benefit would only be the other party. It would not benefit either side at all. Moreover, the sword sect and the Black Emperor sect had some enmity before. But now, the Black Emperor sect hoped that Xiao Chen would turn hostility into friendship. Zhao Chunfeng's words were very sincere. Hearing this, Song Xing and Lin Qing, who were accompanying him, looked at each other and smiled. It seemed that after this battle, the Black Emperor sect had completely seen the strength of the sword sect. They knew that the current sword sect could no longer be bullied by others. Just like Song Xing and Lin Qing, a hint of a smile flashed across Xiao Chen's eyes when he heard Zhao Chunfeng's words. He then smiled and said, "Sect Master He Sui is too kind. I'll have to trouble Tiger King to pass a message to Sect Master He Sui. Just say that the Sword Sect and the Black Emperor Sect will always be friends. In the future, if the Black Emperor Sect needs any help, my Sword Sect will definitely not stand by and watch." The Black Emperor Sect did not wish to have any more conflicts with the Sword Sect. Similarly, Shao Chun did not wish for the Sword Sect to have any more conflicts with the Black Emperor Sect. After all, although the current Sword Sect was not afraid of the Black Emperor Sect, if they really fought, both sects would suffer losses. This was not what He Sui wanted to see, nor was it what Shao Chun wanted to see. They had the same thoughts in their hearts. Therefore, Shao Chun also used this opportunity to express his attitude towards the Black Emperor Sect. Hearing Shao Chun's words, a strange look flashed across Zhao Qinfeng's eyes. Shao Chun was willing to let bygones be bygones and reconcile with the Black Emperor Sect so straightforwardly. This indeed surprised Zhao Qinfeng. At the same time, he also unconsciously looked at Shao Chun in a higher light. At such a young age, Shao Chun's Chung Mansion caused Zhao Qinfeng to involuntarily exclaim in admiration. It had to be known that the reason he was able to have such an imposing manner of dismissing grudges with a smile was not because Shao Chun or the Sword Sect were easy to bully. It was completely because Shao Chun was looking at the big picture and did not want to have too much meaningless entanglement with the Black Emperor Sect. And this kind of thinking was exactly what He Sui had in his heart. However, He Sui had lived for so many years, and Shao Chun had only lived for so many years. However, in terms of mental state, Shao Chun did not seem to be much weaker than He Sui. At the very least, as the head of a sect, Shao Chun was very qualified. He did not make things difficult for Shao Chun in the slightest. He did not even mention anything about what had happened before, as if he had already forgotten about it. Hearing Shao Chun's words, Zhao Qinfeng immediately stood up and bowed again. "Sect Master Shao Chun, I will definitely report your words to my Sect Master." That's good. Yesterday, I was unable to have a drink with the Tiger King. Today, the Tiger King must stay. You and I should have a few drinks. Hearing this, Shao Chun said with a smile. Facing Shao Chun's invitation, Zhao Qinfeng tactfully declined. Sect Master is too polite. There's still many things that I need to deal with in the Black Emperor Sect, so I won't stay any longer. In the future, I will definitely have a drink with Sect Master. Zhao Qinfeng could naturally tell that Shao Chun was just being polite. Facing Zhao Qinfeng's rejection, Shao Chun did not insist and said with a smile, "Since that's the case, then I won't force you." Originally, Shao Chun was just being polite. Since Zhao Qinfeng had rejected him, it was fine. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, Zhao Qinfeng prepared to leave with his people. Of course, before leaving, Zhao Qinfeng also took out the congratulatory gift prepared by the Black Emperor Sect. He didn't even bother to look at it. Shao Chun knew that the congratulatory gift given by the Black Emperor Sect couldn't be that valuable. It was just for show. Shao Chun was right. The congratulatory gift given by the Black Emperor Sect was indeed not anything valuable. There were even many of them that Shao Chun had given to the Black Emperor Sect as compensation for the battle 10 years ago. Now, the Black Emperor Sect had returned them untouched. When Zhao Qinfeng left, Cao Xing personally sent him off. As for Shao Chun, it was obviously impossible for him to personally send Zhao Qinfeng off. Zhao Qinfeng's arrival as a representative of the Black Emperor Sect meant that the relationship between the Sword Sect and the Black Emperor Sect would be eased for a long time. At the very least, based on the current situation, neither side wanted to start a war. This way, Shao Chun could use most of his energy to deal with other matters, such as the matter of the Wuzhou. Although the Wuzhou had already become the territory of the Sword Sect with the surrender of the Heavenly Sword Sect, they had only just taken over. The Sword Sect's control over the Wuzhou was actually very weak. There were even many forces within the Wuzhou that didn't listen to the Sword Sect. Therefore, the matter of the Wuzhou needed to be resolved as soon as possible. Shao Chun didn't want anything to happen in his backyard. Completely controlling the Wuzhou was the most important task of the Sword Sect. They had to stabilize and control the Wuzhou in a short period of time. begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1973. The matter of Wuzhou was very important to the sword sect. After sending Zhao Chunfeng off, Xiao Chun immediately called Song Xing, Lin Qing, and the others over. In the Great Hall, Xiao Chun looked at the people below and said, Wuzhou has just submitted, and there are many things that need to be taken care of. As such, I plan to send someone to oversee Wuzhou and try to completely subdue it in the shortest amount of time. The situation in Wuzhou was somewhat different from the Jin province. It could be said that Wuzhou was more chaotic than the Jin province. After all, the Sky Sword sect was the only first-rate faction in Wuzhou. Later on, the Bloodblade Valley forcefully intervened, causing the situation in Wuzhou to be extremely chaotic. It must be known that the Sky Sword sect's strength could only be considered to be at the bottom of the first-rate factions. As such, it was naturally very difficult for the various factions in Wuzhou to truly submit. It was unlike the Jian province, where the sword sect had the final say. In the face of the sword sect's orders, the various factions in the Jian province did not dare to object at all, nor did they dare to feign compliance, but secretly oppose. However, Wuzhou was different. It was already very difficult for the Sky Sword sect to truly control Wuzhou. In addition, in this battle, the Sky Sword sect had surrendered to the Sword sect, causing the various factions in Wuzhou to be even more chaotic. Therefore, Xiao Chun planned to forcefully suppress the situation in Wuzhou and try to resolve the problem in the shortest amount of time. As for those factions that did not listen, they would be directly destroyed. As for those factions that were willing to submit to the Sword sect, they would naturally be given some benefits. Carrot and stick. This was Xiao Chun's method of dealing with Wuzhou. Song Xing, Zhou Song, and the other 5 deputy sect leaders did not object to Xiao Chun's decision. Indeed, this was the fastest way to resolve Wuzhou. However, if this was to be done, there had to be an expert overseeing Wuzhou. Therefore, Xiao Chun had gathered everyone here to discuss who was more suitable to be sent to Wuzhou. Without much hesitation, Song Xing quickly spoke up after hearing Xiao Chun's words. Sect leader, I feel that Li Ku is the most suitable candidate. After all, he understands Wuzhou. He suggested that Li Ku go. No matter what, Li Ku had once been the leader of the Sky Sword sect. He was clearly the person who understood Wuzhou the most. For example, Li Ku had a better understanding of the situation of the various powers in Wuzhou than the others present. Thus, it would be easier for Li Ku to go and handle these matters. Hearing Song Xing's words, Xiao Chun nodded slightly. Li Ku was indeed the best candidate. Xiao Chun had thought of this before. Moreover, from the beginning, Xiao Chun had planned to let Li Ku be in charge of Wuzhou. However, in Xiao Chun's opinion, Li Ku alone might not be enough. They needed to send another person at the level of a deputy sect leader. After all, with the current situation of Wuzhou, it was hard to rely on one end-realm expert to intimidate them. Moreover, Xiao Chun wanted to take over Wuzhou in a short amount of time. Thus, he naturally needed to send another person to help Li Ku. Deputy sect leader Li Ku is naturally the best choice. However, I feel that we should send 2 deputy sect leaders to intimidate them. Looking at everyone, Xiao Chun opened his mouth and said, 2 deputy sect leaders were needed to suppress them. Song Xing and the others exchanged glances. Then, Lin Qing took the initiative to speak up. Since that is the case, sect leader, let me and Li Ku go. Lin Qing volunteered. Hearing that, Xiao Chun nodded his head. Okay, then I'll have to trouble the 2 of you with the Wuzhou matters. Don't worry, sect leader, we won't let you down. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Lin Qing and Li Ku both cupped their hands and bowed, sending out 2 deputy sect leaders at once. At the same time, Xiao Chun was shocked. Lin Qing and Li Ku brought the experts of the sword sect and rushed to Wuzhou on the same day. As for Wuzhou, Xiao Chun naturally hoped to have it firmly in his hands. After all, a state was really important to the sword sect. Just as Lin Qing and Li Ku were rushing to Wuzhou with their people, the leaders of the various factions were all gathered in the Qin family residence within Wuzhou. The Qin family was an old family power in Wuzhou and they weren't weak. They were just a step away from becoming a first-rate power. The Qin family had a total of 3 old ancestors. The 3 of them were all of the Dao realm. Moreover, one of them was at the peak of the Dao realm and was just a step away from breaking through to the End realm. Once this old ancestor broke through to the End realm, then, without a doubt, the Qin family would be able to reach the heavens in one step and become a first-rate power. Their strength was only second to the Heaven Sword sect, which was why, along with the surrender of the Heaven Sword sect, the various powers in Wuzhou all saw the Qin family as the leader. This time, the Qin family gathered the various powers in Wuzhou. All of a sudden, the sect leaders of the various powers all gathered to the Qin family. At this moment in the Qin family hall, dozens of people sat together. On the main seat, there were 3 old men. The 3 of them were the old ancestors of the Qin family. Under normal circumstances, the 3 old ancestors wouldn't bother about Qin family matters. They would just focus on breaking through to the End realm and making the Qin family a first-rate power. However, this matter was really important and concerned the future of Wuzhou. This was why the 3 old ancestors all came out of seclusion and gathered the various sect leaders. His eyes swept the people present. The old man in the middle was the one who had the highest chance of breaking through to the End realm. He was called Qin Kuan. Sweeping his gaze across the crowd, Qin Kuan said in a hoarse voice, "Everyone, I'm sure all of you are aware of the news of the battle in the Jian province. The Sky Sword sect has surrendered to the Sword's Gate, and Li Ku has become one of the 6 vice presidents of the Sword's Gate. Furthermore, the Sword's Gate has been promoted to a super first-rate force a few days ago. After this battle ends, I believe the Sword sect won't let us off. So, what should we do when facing the Sword sect? Submit or resist? You all should have a plan in your hearts." Qin Kuan said slowly. He didn't beat around the bush, and directly he said the reason why he gathered everyone here. The Heaven Sword sect had submitted to the Sword sect. With that, as the overlord of Wuzhou, after the Heaven Sword sect submitted to the Sword sect, then logically speaking, Wuzhou should also be under the Sword sect. However, the Qin clan was clearly unwilling to see this scene. After all, this was an opportunity for the Qin clan to develop. Without the Sky Sword sect, the Qin clan was undoubtedly the strongest force in the Wu province. If the Qin clan could take advantage of this opportunity to control the Wu province in one fell swoop and become the new overlord of the Wu province, it would definitely be beneficial for the Qin clan's development. However, to control Wuzhou, the Qin family had a crucial problem in front of them, which was the Sword sect. It was obvious that the Sword Gate would not let go of such a big piece of fat meat like the Wu province. Thus, how to deal with the Sword Gate became the problem that the Qin family needed to consider the most. Based on the strength on the surface, the Qin family was definitely not a match for the Sword Gate. Thus, this time, the Qin family had gathered all the sect leaders within the Wu province to discuss this matter. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1974. The Qin family wanted to snatch food from the tiger's mouth and snatch Wuzhou from the Sword sect. One had to say that they were asking for death. Upon hearing Qin Kuan's words, the expressions of the many sect leaders present changed slightly. Obviously, there was no one present who did not know about the Sword Gate. It was one of the top 6 powers in the world. They had 6 End Realm deputy sect leaders. Compared to the Sword sect, the people present were just trash. No one dared to go against the Sword's Gate. After all, the strength of the Sword's Gate was there for all to see. Furthermore, according to the various things that had happened before, the new sect master of the Sword's Gate was not a soft-hearted person. On the contrary, he was decisive in killing. Looking at the fate of the Bloodblade Valley and the deceased demon sect, it was clear that almost all of them were killed. Even if there were fish that escaped the net, it would only be 2 or 3 small cats. They really did not have the courage to go against the Sword's Gate. Looking at the changes in the faces of the Sword's Gate, Qin Kuan and the other 2 Qin clan's old ancestors knew that these people were extremely afraid of the Sword's Gate. They exchanged glances with one another before Qin Kuan opened his mouth and said, What's wrong? Are you all scared out of your wits? Are you all so afraid of the sword sect? Qin Kuan's tone was filled with disdain. However, the sect leaders didn't care about that at all. What a joke. Compared to their lives, what was this bit of mockery? Moreover, their strength wasn't a match for the sword sect. Were they going to send themselves to death? None of the people present were fools. On the contrary, to be able to reach the position of the head of a sect, one was definitely a person of great intelligence. Although Qin Kuan did not say it clearly, everyone knew that the Qin family was eyeing the entire Wuzhou. They wanted to use this chance to control Wuzhou. However, the sect leaders didn't think highly of the Qin family's thoughts. What a joke. Everyone could see that the sword sect was determined to get Wuzhou. For the Qin family to want to snatch food from the tiger's mouth, they were asking for death. None of the people present dared to agree with Qin Kuan. In fact, no one dared to go against the sword sect. Looking at the expressions of everyone present, Qin Kuan coldly smiled and said, "This Qin originally thought that all of you were hot-blooded, but I didn't expect that a mere sword sect would actually scare all of you to this extent. Let me tell everyone the truth. The Qin family will not hand over this Wuzhou to others. We are all powers born and raised in Wuzhou. Are we going to let an outsider rule Wuzhou? My Qin clan will be the first to disagree. Moreover, 3 days ago, this old man had already sent people to the Buzhou. I believe that the Black Emperor sect is very willing to cooperate with us." The Qin family wanted to snatch food from the tiger's mouth, but they knew that there was a huge gap between their strength and the sword sects, so the Qin family naturally wouldn't be so foolish as to seek their own destruction. Thus, they had to find a powerful backer. And in the surrounding provinces, the only one that had the ability to contend against the sword sect was the Black Emperor sect. Thus, the Qin family naturally set their sights on the Black Emperor sect. They wanted to use the Black Emperor sect to restrain the sword sect. Of course, the Qin family also knew that they couldn't trap a wolf without sacrificing a child. Thus, this time, they sent people to the Black Emperor sect. The Qin family was willing to use a third of the various resources in Wuzhou in exchange for the protection of the Black Emperor sect. They wanted to use the Black Emperor sect to resist the sword sect. Hearing Qin Kuan's words, all the sect leaders were stunned. Then, the expressions in the eyes of a few people changed slightly. The Qin family alone obviously couldn't stop the sword sect. However, if the Black Emperor sect was added, then it was hard to say. Some people were already tempted. Seeing this, Qin Kuan and the other two smiled slightly. It had to be said that the Qin family's appetite was very big, and they were also very bold. They actually wanted to snatch food from the tiger's mouth from the sword sect's hands and snatch the entire Wuzhou. However, the Qin family clearly didn't know that the Black Emperor sect had already expressed goodwill towards the sword sect. Just as the Qin family was gathering all the powers in Wuzhou, the Black Emperor sect's Zhao Chanfeng had just left the sword sect. Under such circumstances, what choice would the Black Emperor sect make? The Qin family clearly didn't know about this, and thought that the Black Emperor sect and the sword sect were still enemies. Little did they know that after the sword sect revealed its true strength, the Black Emperor sect's attitude completely changed. They only thought that the Black Emperor sect and the sword sect had a battle 10 years ago. As a result, the two sects definitely had enmity, but who would have thought that enmity was nothing in the face of benefits and the overall situation? Furthermore, the sword sect and the Black Emperor sect weren't considered mortal enemies, so there was naturally nothing that couldn't be resolved. Just as the Qin family was still fantasizing about snatching food from the tiger's mouth and taking the opportunity to control the Wuzhou, the Qin family elder that was sent out 3 days ago had also arrived at the Black Emperor sect. Within the great hall of the Black Emperor sect, He Sui and the two princes sat upright in the hall. Below them, an elder of the Qin family respectfully bowed and said, "I am Qin Zhao of the Qin family of the Wuzhou. Greetings, sect leader He Sui and the two princes." Hearing Qin Zhao's words, He Sui said indifferently, "Wuzhou Qin family? Why have you come all the way to my Black Emperor sect?" He Sui naturally looked down on the Qin family. A small family that wasn't even a first-rate power wasn't even worth mentioning in the eyes of the Black Emperor sect. Qin Zhao could sense the disdain and indifference in He Sui's words. However, he didn't dare to be the slightest bit dissatisfied. Hearing He Sui's words, he hurriedly replied respectfully, "I'm here to specially represent the Qin family to rely on the Black Emperor sect. The Qin family is willing to become a subsidiary force of the Black Emperor sect." "Oh, interesting. Then what does your Qin family need my Black Emperor sect to do?" Hearing Qin Zhao's words, He Sui said with interest. The Qin family had come all the way to the Black Emperor sect and expressed their willingness to become a subsidiary force of the Black Emperor sect. Even Qin Zhao himself wouldn't believe that there wasn't a request. Facing He Sui's question, Qin Zhao didn't beat around the bush and immediately replied, "My Qin family wants to control the Wuzhou and needs the help of the Black Emperor sect. In this case, the Qin family is willing to share 1/3 of the cultivation resources of the Wuzhou to the Black Emperor sect." To put it bluntly, asking the Black Emperor sect to help the Qin family control the Wuzhou was asking the Black Emperor sect to deal with the Sword sect. Hearing Qin Zhao's words, He Sui immediately laughed out loud. Haha, not understanding why He Sui suddenly laughed, Qin Zhao respectfully stood below with his head lowered. Even though he was puzzled in his heart, he didn't dare to show the slightest disrespect. The laughter echoed in the hall. After a long while, He Sui stopped laughing and looked at Qin Zhao with a spurious smile. "Your Qin family wants to control the Wuzhou, so you can't find my Black Emperor sect. You want my Black Emperor sect to help you resist the pressure of the Sword sect, right?" "Yes." Hearing this, Qin Zhao honestly nodded. Seeing Qin Zhao nod, He Sui smiled and said, "What a good plan. However, your Qin family should know that the Tiger King of my Black Emperor sect is currently in the Sword sect. He is representing me to congratulate the Sword sect on its promotion to a first-rate force. Do you think I will agree to your Qin family's request? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1975. He Sui looked at Qin Zhao with a smile that wasn't a smile. Hearing those words, Qin Zhao's face instantly paled. He wasn't stupid and naturally understood the meaning behind He Sui's words. His body couldn't help but tremble slightly. Looking at He Sui, who was seated on the main seat, Qin Zhao didn't know what to say for a moment. The Black Emperor sect had taken the initiative to express goodwill to the Sword's Gate. In this way, it meant that the Qin clan's wishful thinking had completely failed. Not only would the Black Emperor sect not help the Qin clan, it was even very likely that they would tell the Sword's Gate about this and use this to sell a favor to the Sword's Gate. The expression in his eyes drastically changed as he looked at Qin Zhao. He Sui smiled and said, "Qin Zhao, there's a saying that a greedy person is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Your Qin clan is like that. With the current situation, your Qin clan actually wants to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. I have to say, you really don't know what's good for you. Men, capture Qin Zhao and send him to the Sword sect." It was exactly as Qin Zhao had guessed. He Sui had no intention of helping the Qin clan. Perhaps a mere Wuzhou wasn't worth the Black Emperor sect offending the Sword sect. The Sword sect had already completely matured. To the Black Emperor sect, offending the Sword sect for a mere Wuzhou was not worth it. Right now, the Black Emperor sect only wanted to coexist peacefully with the Sword sect. Following He Sui's words, one of the Black Emperor sect's princes in the hall immediately took action. Qin Zhao did not have the slightest ability to resist and was captured by him. Of course, it was the same for the people from the Qin clan who came with Qin Zhao. After capturing Qin Zhao and the rest of the Qin clan members, He Sui immediately arranged for people to send Qin Zhao and the rest to the Sword sect. He handed them over to Xiao Chun and allowed Xiao Chun to do whatever he wanted with them. The Qin clan could be said to have tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. A day later, a martial marquis from the Sword sect and the Black Emperor sect arrived with Qin Zhao and the rest. Originally, he was teaching Luan in the cave. At this moment, Cangxing quickly walked in and whispered a few words to Xiao Chun. Hearing this, A smile appeared on Xiao Chen's face as he turned his head to look at Luan, and said, Luan, you cultivate by yourself. Daddy has some matters to attend to and needs to leave for a while. After speaking, Xiao Chun and Song Xing left the cave together. In the Sword Sect main hall, a martial marquis from the Black Emperor sect escorted Qin Zhao and the others to the main hall. Looking at Xiao Chun, who was sitting on the main seat, the martial marquis cupped his hands and bowed. Greetings, Sect Master Xiao. After bowing respectfully, the martial marquis also truthfully told Xiao Chun about Qin Zhao and the others heading to the Black Emperor sect. After hearing the martial marquis's words, Xiao Chun smiled and said, Thank you, sect leader He Sui. I will definitely remember this favor. He Sui had sent Qin Zhao and the others to the Sword Sect. Xiao Chun naturally had to accept this favor. Hearing this, the martial marquis cupped his hands and replied, Sect Master Xiao is too polite. After ordering people to first arrange for the people of the Black Emperor sect to rest, Xiao Chun looked at Qin Zhao after the people of the Black Emperor sect left. Facing Xiao Chun's gaze, Qin Zhao's expression was already ashen. After coming to the Sword Sect, Qin Zhao could almost imagine his own outcome, as well as the entire Qin family's outcome. Looking at Qin Zhao, Xiao Chun was very calm. There was even a faint smile on his face. However, no matter how one looked at it, this smile felt abnormally cold. For a person to be so stupid, it really makes people speechless. A small Qin family wants to occupy the entire Wu state. With a sneer, Xiao Chun said indifferently. With the Qin family's strength, wanting to occupy the entire Wu state was indeed thinking too much. He couldn't be bothered to ask Qin Zhao any questions. In any case, the Black Emperor sect had already told him everything he needed to know. Therefore, Xiao Chun had nothing to say to Qin Zhao and the others. With that, without waiting for Qin Zhao to reply, Xiao Chun looked at Song Xing and said, Tell Lin Qing that the Qin family doesn't need to exist anymore. As for these people, kill them as well. Without even asking, Xiao Chun had already sentenced the Qin family to death. Hearing this, Song Xing respectfully nodded in agreement. Following which, Qin Zhao and the others were dragged out of the main hall by a group of Sword Sect experts and executed on the spot. Xiao Chun didn't put a mere Qin family in his eyes. This time, the Qin family's plan to rely on the Black Emperor sect to fight against the Sword Sect had completely failed. Very quickly, Song Xing followed orders and passed on Xiao Chun's message to Lin Qing and Li Ku, who were already in Wu State. After receiving Song Xing's message, Lin Qing and Li Ku, who had already entered Wu State and arrived at the former location of the Sky Sword Sect, sat in the main hall of the Sky Sword Sect and looked at Li Ku with a smile. Lin Qing said indifferently, This Qin family is really interesting. Their courage has actually grown to such an extent. They don't know what's good for them. Li Ku replied indifferently. Li Ku was naturally not unfamiliar with the Qin family. As a power second only to the Sky Sword Sect in Wu State, the Qin family was indeed ambitious. Li Ku had known this before. However, this time, the Qin family's ambition was simply too great. It could even be said that they were seeking their own death. They didn't even look at the strength of the Sword Sect. They dared to covet the entire Wu State. If this wasn't seeking their own death, what was it? According to Xiao Chun's meaning, the Qin family didn't need to exist anymore. Xiao Chun had already sentenced the Qin family to death. At the same time, Qin Zhao and the others had also been killed. However, at this moment, the people of the Qin family still didn't know about this. At this moment, the people of the Qin family were still fantasizing about their lives after taking over Wu State. They were still fantasizing about how to become a first-rate force. With the help of the Black Emperor sect, the people of the Qin family thought that they would definitely succeed this time. However, they didn't expect that the Black Emperor sect had already sold the Qin family out. Moreover, they had sold them out completely. A great disaster was about to befall them. It was laughable that the entire Qin family was still daydreaming. In the backyard of the Qin family, Qin Kun and the other two patriarchs were sitting together, drinking and chatting. Is there still no news from Qin Zhao and the others? One of the patriarchs asked. When he heard this, the other old ancestor smiled. They have probably reached the Black Emperor sect. I think there will be news soon. The moment he said this, the old ancestor turned around and looked at Qin Kun. Big brother, if our Qin family can successfully control Wu State, I believe that you won't be far from breaking through to the End Realm. Qin Kun was only a step away from the End Realm. When he heard this, he smiled. How is it so easy to break through to the End Realm? However, if we have enough resources, I have some confidence. Haha, when Big Brother breaks through to the End Realm, our Qin family will be a first-rate power. When they heard this, the two of them smiled. Qin Kun and the other two were still daydreaming. What they didn't know was that Lin Qing and Li Ku had already led a bunch of sword sect experts over to the Qin family. A calamity was about to descend, but the Qin family didn't know anything at all, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1976. Everyone in the Qin family was still daydreaming. A day later, Lin Qing, Li Ku, and a group of experts from the sword sect appeared in Qin City through the transportation array. Qin City could be considered a large city in Wu Province, so it was very prosperous. Looking at the people coming and going on the streets, Lin Qing said softly, "Remember, don't destroy Qin City later." This time, Lin Qing and the others came to Qin City to attack the Qin family. As such, a battle was unavoidable. Therefore, Lin Qing reminded everyone not to affect Qin City when they attacked later. Hearing this, the people from the sword sect nodded, and the group walked towards the Qin family. Along the way to the Qin family mansion, Lin Qing did not attack immediately. Instead, he set up a symbol array around the Qin family mansion. When the battle broke out, with the protection of the symbol array, the aftershocks would not affect other places in Qin City. Moreover, the people from the Qin family would not have any chance to escape. After doing all this, Lin Qing led the group to the main gate of the Qin family mansion. Seeing Lin Qing and the others slowly walking towards the Qin family mansion, two Qin family guards immediately opened their mouths to berate them. "Stop, who are you people?" "People from the sword sect," Lin Qing said indifferently when he heard the words of the two guards. When they heard this, the two guards did not react in the beginning. However, after a short while, their expressions changed drastically at the same time. Their feet involuntarily stepped back. Unfortunately, just as the two of them were retreating, one of the sword sect elders behind Lin Qing and Li Ku immediately attacked. The long sword in his hand slashed and instantly ended the lives of the two guards. Since they were here to destroy the Qin family, there was naturally no need to be polite. After all, after today, the Qin family would no longer exist. They openly killed their way in through the main gate. At first, the Qin family did not understand the situation when a group of people suddenly rushed in. However, soon, as the people from the sword sect slaughtered their way in, the Qin family began to wail in pain. With the Qin family's strength, they were naturally no match for the sword sect's Lin Qing and Li Ku. Moreover, this time, other than Lin Qing and Li Ku, the two sword leaders, Zhao Yu and Li Sui, had also come to Wuzhou. Therefore, there was no need for Lin Qing and Li Ku to make a move. The Qin family was already unable to resist. Soon, Qin Kun and the other two ancestors of the Qin clan, as well as a group of higher-ups of the Qin clan, appeared one after another. Facing Lin Qing's massacre, Qin Kun and the other two ancestors of the Qin clan appeared one after another. In the front yard, when Qin Kun and the other two saw Li Ku, their expressions changed immediately. Qin Kun even said subconsciously, "Li Ku, it's you." Qin Kun, in the past, I thought that you were a very stupid person. However, I did not expect that you would actually be this stupid. You would even do something like snatching food from Tiger's mouth. Faced with Qin Kun's shock, Li Ku said indifferently. Hearing Li Ku's words, Qin Kun's expression turned extremely gloomy. He did not expect that the person who came would actually be Li Ku. Looking at the people beside Li Ku, Qin Kun quickly guessed that they should all be experts from the sword sect. He did not expect the people from the sword sect to come so quickly. Moreover, there was still no news from the Black Emperor sect. There was also no news from Qin Zhao. At this point, if Qin Kuan still did not sense that something was wrong, then he should really bang his head against the wall and die. There must have been an accident, Qin Kuan thought to himself. However, Lin Qing did not give him too much time to think. He was also too lazy to talk nonsense with the people of the Qin family. Lin Qing said indifferently, "Kill." Xiao Qin's order was to completely destroy the Qin family. Therefore, Lin Qing naturally would not show any mercy. He also guessed Xiao Qin's intention. It was nothing more than to use the Qin family to intimidate the various large factions in Wuzhou. Therefore, he could not show any mercy to the Qin family. He had to completely destroy them with iron and blood. Only then could he achieve the effect of intimidating the other factions. Following Lin Qing's words, the experts from the sword sect all attacked. Although the Qin family was not a match for them, they did not give up without putting up a fight. Unfortunately, the resistance of the Qin family was not worth mentioning in the eyes of the experts from the sword sect. In an instant, the entire Qin family residence was filled with blood. Everyone from the Qin family, no matter who they were, was killed by the people from the sword sect. Looking at the scene before him, Qin Kuan's heart was bleeding. One had to know that these were all his clansmen. Looking at Lin Qing and Li Ku, who had not yet attacked, Qin Kuan coldly shouted with bloodshot eyes, "Li Ku, isn't your sword sect too overbearing? What did my Qin family do that your sword sect has to treat my Qin family like this?" "Okay, you old fellow, don't you know what you did? Qin Zhao went to the Black Emperor sect, you know that, right?" I really don't know. With your Qin family's strength, who gave you the courage to target Wuzhou?" What a joke. Facing Qin Kuan's question, Li Ku did not reply. Instead, it was Lin Qing who laughed. Hearing Lin Qing's words, Qin Kuan and the other two old ancestors of the Qin family were stunned. The matter was exposed. Moreover, the sword sect already knew about it. They didn't expect the matter to be exposed so quickly. Facing the shock of the three, Lin Qing was too lazy to talk nonsense and directly said, "Okay, enough nonsense. Prepare to die." As he said that, Lin Qing directly attacked. A terrifying aura surged into the sky from his body. Feeling Lin Qing's aura, Qin Kuan's expression changed. "End realm, you're a deputy sect leader of the sword sect." He didn't recognize Lin Qing, so at the start, Qin Kuan didn't know who he was. However, sensing that Lin Qing's cultivation had stepped into the end realm, Qin Kuan guessed right away that Lin Qing was the same as Li Ku, a deputy sect leader of the sword sect. He didn't expect the sword sect to send out two end realm experts at once. Since that was the case, the Qin family had no way to survive. One end realm expert was enough to make the Qin family unable to fight back, much less two. This gave the Qin family no chance at all. Qin Kuan regretted in his heart, but unfortunately, Lin Qing didn't give him a chance. He stepped out and instantly appeared in front of Qin Kuan, punching out. Seeing that, although Qin Kuan tried to block, unfortunately, the difference in cultivation was too huge. With just one fist, Lin Qing sent Qin Kuan flying. At the same time, along with Lin Qing attacking, Li Ku naturally didn't stay idle. He immediately attacked the other two old ancestors of the Qin family. In the hands of Lin Qing and Li Ku, Qin Kuan and the other two old ancestors of the Qin family weren't their opponents at all. In just one move, they were forced to retreat and were heavily injured. Blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth, but Lin Qing didn't give Qin Kuan any chance to breathe. After sending him flying, he didn't stop and once again attacked Qin Kuan, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1977. The Qin family wasn't able to wait for the help of the Black Emperor sect. On the contrary, they were mercilessly slaughtered by the sword sect experts. Qin Kuan and the other two old ancestors of the Qin family couldn't fight back at all in the hands of Lin Qing and Li Ku. At the same time, the other members of the Qin family were the same. Compared to the sword sect, the Qin family was too weak. They weren't even on the same level. Under the intense battle, in just 2 hours, Qin Kuan and the other two ancestors of the Qin clan were killed by Lin Qing and the other two. Even until their deaths, Qin Kuan and the other two ancestors would never have thought that the Qin clan would be so easily annihilated by the Sword's Gate. Lin Qing and Li couldn't hold back at all against the Qin family. Anyone from the Qin family was wiped out in a short day. After dealing with the Qin family matters, Lin Qing and Li Ku directly took charge of Qin City. At the same time, they sent people to invite the sect leaders of the other powers of Wuzhou to Qin City. They directly chose Qin City to meet the sect leaders of the various powers of Wuzhou. This was undoubtedly to give them a warning. If anyone wanted to go against the Sword Sect, then the Qin family had foresight. Without other top powers interfering in Wuzhou matters, it would be much easier for the Sword Sect to control Wuzhou. Xiao Chun handed the matters of Wuzhou to Lin Qing and Li Ku. At this moment, in the Sword Sect, Xiao Chun was busy dealing with other matters. He didn't need to worry about Wuzhou. After all, they sent out 2 End Realm deputy sect leaders. If they couldn't even deal with a small Wuzhou, then that would be weird. 3 days passed. The sect leaders of the various powers of Wuzhou all gathered in Qin City. In these 3 days, the news of the Qin family being wiped out had spread throughout Wuzhou. It did not take more than 4 hours. From the moment the experts of Sword's Gate stepped into the Qin clan, it had been less than 4 hours. The Qin clan, which was still fantasizing about dominating the Wu prefecture, was destroyed just like that. They did not even have the slightest ability to retaliate. The destruction of the Qin family made the various powers of Wuzhou recognize reality. In front of the Sword Sect, apart from submitting, they didn't have any other choice. Within the Qin family manor. At this moment, the Qin family manor had been cleaned up. The corpses of the Qin family members were also cleaned up. At this moment, Lin Qing and Li Ku sat on the main seats in the hall that belonged to the Qin family. There were many experts of the Sword Sect. At the same time, the sect leaders of the various powers of Wuzhou were present. In less than 10 days, this was the second time that all the sect leaders of the large and small factions in Wuzhou had gathered at the Qin family. However, unlike the last time, the Qin clan had been annihilated this time, and the Sword's Gate had become the host of this gathering. His gaze swept across the crowd, and Lin Qing was the first to speak. Perhaps some of you don't know me. I am one of the 6 deputy sect leaders of the Sword Sect. My name is Lin Qing. As for the person beside me, I believe everyone is very familiar with him. I won't waste time here. Wuzhou must belong to the Sword Sect. I believe no one has any objections to this, right? Lin Qing was not polite in the slightest when speaking to these people. Thus, he went straight to the point and announced the Sword Sect's sovereignty over Wuzhou in front of everyone. Wuzhou must return to the Sword Sect control. This was very clear. No one could change it. Hearing Lin Qing's words, many of the sect leaders present chose to remain silent. Although some of them still felt conflicted, they did not dare to speak out in opposition. What a joke. Even the Qin family had been wiped out. If anyone dared to jump out and oppose the Sword Sect, they were really tired of living. No one dared to object. Seeing that everyone had chosen to remain silent, Lin Qing smiled slightly. Very good. It seems that no one has any objections. Everyone was silent. Lin Qing smiled. Then, he discussed in detail the matters of Wuzhou with the sect leaders present. According to Xiao Qin's method, since the Qin family had been wiped out, the deterrence effect had been achieved. Next, it was time to give some benefits. The benefits were nothing more than cultivation resources. Of course, there was also the protection of the Sword Sect. As the various major powers in Wuzhou, since the Sword Sect had already taken control of Wuzhou, then these powers would naturally receive the protection of the Sword Sect. In the future, if there were any matters that concerned their survival, the Sword Sect would not stand by and do nothing. After Lin Qing's efforts, the various sect leaders present slowly accepted the fact that the Sword Sect had taken control of Wuzhou. Firstly, the Sword Sect taking control of Wuzhou was not something they could object to. This was something that was inevitable. No one could stop it. Secondly, the Sword Sect taking control of Wuzhou was actually beneficial to the various major powers present. This was equivalent to giving the various major powers in Wuzhou a backer. It was good to lean against a big tree for shade. To the various major powers in Wuzhou, the sword sect was a big tree. It was a big tree that reached the sky. Under Xiao Qin's carrot and stick policies, Lin Qing and Li Ke very quickly stabilized the various major powers in Wuzhou. Of course, this was only the beginning. To truly stabilize Wuzhou, Lin Qing and Li Ke still had to put in a lot of hard work. Furthermore, the two of them did not plan on returning to the sword sect immediately. They would probably stay in Wuzhou for quite some time. After all, Wuzhou had just been stabilized. The sword sect would definitely send experts to hold the fort there. The matters in Wuzhou were basically settled. Originally, there were no particularly powerful factions in Wuzhou. If it were not for the reckless Qin family, probably none of the major or minor powers in Wuzhou would dare to challenge the sword sect. After stabilizing Wuzhou, Lin Qing and Li Ke issued the first sword order. It was to completely eliminate the remaining forces of the Bloodblade Valley in Wuzhou. Back then, the three factions of the Bloodblade Valley had joined forces to attack the sword sect. In the end, they were defeated by the sword sect. Lin Gang and the other experts of the Bloodblade Valley had died. However, the headquarters of the Bloodblade Valley was in Wuzhou. There were definitely some remaining forces of the Bloodblade sect left behind. As for eliminating the remaining forces of the Bloodblade Valley, on one hand, it was to eliminate them completely. On the other hand, it was to see which of the major and minor powers in Wuzhou were outwardly obedient to the sword sect. Xiao Qin's intention was to directly kill those who outwardly complied. Leaving them alive would be a disaster. After the order was issued, the major and minor powers in Wuzhou quickly took action. In the sword sect, Xiao Qin looked at Lin Qing's message. He knew that the situation in Wuzhou had basically stabilized. A smile appeared on his face. The stability of Wuzhou was naturally a good thing for the future development of the sword sect. Sitting together with Xiao Qin, Song Xing naturally knew about the current situation in Wuzhou. At this moment, he also smiled and nodded. Sect leader, the matters in Wuzhou are basically no longer a problem. I'm afraid that we will have to pay more attention to the matters of the sixth sect competition. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation votes. Chapter 1978. The Sixth Sect Grand Meeting. Upon hearing Song Xing's words, Xiao Qin nodded slightly. Just a few days ago, the Verdant Sect had sent an invitation to the Sixth Sect Grand Meeting. To put it bluntly, the Sixth Sect Grand Meeting was a gathering of the six super first-rate forces. It was originally a five-sect Grand Meeting, but this time, following the rise of the Sword Sect, the five-sect Grand Meeting had become a six-sect Grand Meeting. Since the Verdant Sect was willing to send an invitation, it was equivalent to the other five super first-rate forces acknowledging the fact that the Sword Sect had been promoted to a super first-rate force. Therefore, they had invited the Sword Sect to participate in the Sixth Sect Grand Meeting. Therefore, Xiao Qin would definitely attend the Sixth Sect Grand Meeting. According to Song Xing, the Sixth Sect Grand Meeting was nothing more than a gathering of the six super first-rate forces. It should be known this super first-rate force had already surpassed the scope of a first-rate force. Currently, all the super first-rate forces in the Great Thousand World, including the Sword Sect, had the goal of becoming one of the 10 great Lingtian sects. As such, a super first-rate force was considered a threat to the 10 great Lingtian sects. Therefore, the 10 great Lingtian sects' attitude towards the six super first-rate forces was not considered friendly. It was precisely because of this that the six super first-rate forces had no choice but to band together in order to guard against the 10 great Lingtian sects. It was also because of this that there were rarely any major battles between the super first-rate forces. This was also what the Black Emperor sect had always been wary of. After all, the 10 great Lingtian sects had always been looking forward to a major battle between the six super first-rate forces, especially the 10 great Lingtian sects that were ranked at the bottom. This was because once a super first-rate force succeeded in becoming one of the 10 great Lingtian sects, it meant that one of the Lingtian sects would definitely fall from the spiritual pedestal stage. Of course, although a super first-rate force was strong, its threat to the 10 great Lingtian sects was limited, especially the few Lingtian sects that were ranked at the top. They did not even take a super first-rate force like the Sword sect seriously. Therefore, both sides could coexist peacefully. This time, the Verdant sect took the initiative to send an invitation. Moreover, it was personally sent by a vice sect master. This could be considered as giving the Sword sect enough face. As such, the Sword sect naturally had to participate in this 6-sect conference. However, before participating in the 6-sect grand meeting, Xiao Chun still had one more thing to do, and that was to visit the Dan Valley. There was still a year before the 6-sect grand meeting began. Before that, Xiao Chun intended to personally make a trip to the Dan Valley. As for his objective, it was naturally to seek medicine. Xiao Chun, Long Qing, Xinyuan Ling, Qin Shu, Chun Yu, Long Yang, and the others all needed elixirs if they wanted to improve their cultivation quickly. Although the Sword sect also had its own alchemists compared to the Dan Valley, there was a huge difference. There were many high-grade elixirs that the Sword sect's alchemists could not refine. Moreover, in terms of alchemy resources, the Sword sect was also much worse than the Dan Valley. There were many elixirs that the Sword sect could not refine. It was also because of this that Xiao Chun decided to personally make a trip to the Dan Valley. It was not uncommon to make a special trip to the Dan Valley to seek medicine in the Great Thousand World. After all, the Dan Valley was a gathering place for alchemists. In the Great Thousand World, more than 80% of the alchemists gathered in the Dan Valley. In particular, the high-grade alchemists were almost all contracted by the Dan Valley. Therefore, if one wanted to obtain good and high-grade elixirs, the only way was to go to the Dan Valley. This was what Zhou Song and Wu Huan had told him. According to Zhou Song and Wu Huan, although the Dan Valley was ranked among the top 10 Lingtian sects and was powerful, under normal circumstances, the Dan Valley rarely participated in the affairs of the Great Thousand World. They were all focused on alchemy. It could be said that the Dan Valley was a permanent neutral sect and never participated in the competition of the Great Thousand World. No matter who it was, as long as they could afford the price or meet the conditions of the Dan Valley, they would be able to obtain the elixirs from the Dan Valley. Xiao Chun planned to make a trip to the Dan Valley, but he did not set off immediately because Xiao Chun was waiting for Qin Shru and the other girls. Going to the Dan Valley would also be a good opportunity to take Qin Shru and the other girls out for a walk. After all, after coming to the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chun basically did not leave the Sword sect. Every day, he would either deal with the matters of the Sword sect or cultivate. As a result, Qin Shru and the other girls also cultivated vigorously like him. After so many years, it was time to relax. Of course, there's also Long Qing and Xinyuan Ling, but the two of them would not necessarily go. These two fellows were now focused on improving their cultivation and catching up with him. In this regard, Xiao Chun was helpless. After waiting for 3 days, Qin Shru and the other girls finally came out of seclusion one after another. This time, the 5 girls had gained a lot from cultivating in the Heaven Spirit Pagoda. Their strength had also improved a lot, and all of them had stepped into the Immortal Emperor realm. This made Xiao Chun very happy. After the 5 girls came out of seclusion, Xiao Chun arranged the matters of the Sword sect. The next day, the group set off for the Dan Valley. This time, there were many people. Qin Shru and the other girls, Luan Luan, Qin Yao, Qing Luo, Fei Mei, and Lan, Si Ju, Lu Zhu, Xiao Qing, Bai Ruyue, Wu Huan, Yang Song, and several other experts of the Sword sect. The group left the Sword sect in a grandiose manner. Wu Huan and Yang Song were there to protect Xiao Chun. After all, as the sect master of the Sword sect, Xiao Chun's safety could not be a problem. In order to be absolutely safe, Wu Huan even brought along a spatial compass. He was afraid that if they encountered any danger that was difficult to deal with, Xiao Chun would be able to escape. Xiao Chun did not have much of an opinion about Wu Huan and Yang Song going with them. The group left the Sword sect. Perhaps because she had not gone out to play for a long time, the little girl Wan Wan was abnormally excited. She insisted on riding on Xiao Chun's neck and happily chattered nonstop. Xiao Chun did not refuse. After all, during this period of time, he had indeed been a little cold to Luan Luan, causing the little girl to be quite resentful. Fortunately, Xiao Qing and Bai Riyue were accompanying her. Otherwise, the little girl would probably cause trouble again. On the way out of the sword sect, Xiao Chun wore casual clothes and did not reveal his identity. In truth, after being the sect master of the sword sect for so many years, Xiao Chun had not properly strolled around the Jin province. Accompanied by Qin Shiru and the other girls, Xiao Chun arrived at a city called Hundred Sword City. This was a city close to the border of the Jian province, adjacent to the Bazhou. Strolling along the streets of Hundred Sword City, Xiao Chun could not help but sigh as he looked at the lively streets with Qin Shiru and the other girls by his side. It must be said that I am indeed not qualified to be the sect master of the sword sect. After so many years, there are many places in the Jian province that I have not been to. For example, I have never heard of this Hundred Sword City before. Who would have thought that there would be such a bustling city at the border? Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1979. Xiao Chen had been in charge of the sword sect for almost 20 years. However, Xiao Chen was not very familiar with the major cities in the Jian province. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yang Song smiled and said, "Sect Master is very busy every day. Moreover, Hundred Sword City is located at the edge of the Jian province. It's not considered a big city." Yang Song was obviously more familiar with Hundred Sword City than Xiao Chun. As they walked, Yang Song introduced the situation of Hundred Sword City to Xiao Chun. According to Yang Song, Hundred Sword City was located at the border between the Jian province and the Ba province. Therefore, cultivators from the two provinces often gathered here. Moreover, there were no major forces in Hundred Sword City. Therefore, even though Hundred Sword City was bustling with noise and excitement, it was actually considered a city of chaos. Especially before the rise of the Swords Gate, the Hundred Sword City was even more so. Many martial artists from the Bazhou came to the Hundred Sword City with their heads held high, not for any other reason, but because they had the backing of the Black Emperor's sect. When cultivators from the two provinces gathered, there would naturally be some fights. After listening to Yang Song's introduction, Xiao Chun had a preliminary understanding of Hundred Sword City. In general, although Hundred Sword City was located in the Jian province, due to the decline of the sword sect, the cultivators from Aba province were obviously superior to the cultivators from the Jian province in Hundred Sword City. However, this situation had improved with the rise of the sword sect. After all, the sword sect was now a super first-rate force, and its strength was not any weaker than the Black Emperor's sect. As a result, the cultivators from the Jian province naturally had some confidence at the border between the two provinces. It had been a long time since they went out. Qin Shu and the other women were very excited when they saw the bustling Hundred Sword City. At this time, the 5 women were holding Luan Luan's hand. Accompanied by 2 elders from the sword sect, they strolled around and soon bought many things. Of course, they were all women's items. Xiao Chen naturally did not say anything about this. Seeing the happy appearance of the 5 women, Xiao Chun was also in a good mood. Thinking about it, it had been a long time since he had relaxed like this. Especially after he became the sect master of the sword sect. He had not brought the 5 women out to play like this. He was in a good mood, but this good mood did not last long. Soon, Xiao Chun heard a commotion. Looking for the source of the sound, he saw Qin Shiru and the 5 women arguing with a luxuriously dressed young master. Frowning slightly, Xiao Chun looked at the young master and walked towards the 5 women. As he walked towards Qin Shiru and the 5 women, Xiao Chun had already heard the young master's words. "Such beauties, huh? It seems that this young master's luck is pretty good today." Hearing this, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with a cold light. Xiao Chun had already guessed the whole story. Looking at the young master, Xiao Chen's heart grew colder. He actually dared to have ideas about Qin Shiru and the others. He was simply courting death. Not only Xiao Chun, but Yang Song and Wu Huan, who were following behind Xiao Chun, also had unfriendly expressions. He even dared to take liberties with the women of the sword sect master. This young master clearly did not know the difference between life and death. Xiao Chen walked up to Qin Shiru and the 5 women. When they saw him, the coldness on their faces receded slightly. Looking at Xiao Chen, graceful Hongxiu spoke first. Husband, knowing what graceful Hongxiu wanted to say, Xiao Chen nodded slightly, then looked at the young master and said, "Do you want to die?" The cause of the matter was very simple. When the young master saw Qin Shiru and the 5 women, he immediately went up to them. Unfortunately, Qin Shiru and the other women completely ignored him. How could the young master let go of such beauties? He forcefully blocked Qin Shiru and the 5 women and started arguing. Qin Shiru and the other women were indeed attracting bees and butterflies. However, Xiao Chen was now the sect master of the sword sect. How could he allow his women to be coveted by others? Xiao Chen coldly looked at the young man and said. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the young man was obviously used to being a playboy. Perhaps he had some influence in the 100-Sword City, so he didn't put Xiao Chen in his eyes at all. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the young man didn't hold back at all. Instead, he sneered. "You're their husband? This young master has taken a fancy to your women." The young master actually dared to say such words in front of Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Xiao Chen was so angry that he laughed. At the same time, Yang Song, who was following Xiao Chen, was so angry that he could not help but attack. In the Jin province, there was actually someone who dared to be disrespectful to Xiao Chen, forcefully suppressing the anger in his heart. At this moment, as long as Xiao Chen said a word, Yang Song would definitely not hesitate to attack and kill this playboy young master in front of him. Looking at this person with a sneer, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "Very good. It seems like you're a top figure in 100-Sword City." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, one of the guards behind the young master coldly said, "Ha, brat, do you know who our young master is? He's the only son of the Black Emperor's sect's Marquis Evergreen." The young master's name was He Sheng. His father was the Black Emperor's sect's Marquis Evergreen, He Changqing. He originally thought that He Sheng should be someone from 100-Sword City. Who would have thought that he was actually the son of the Black Emperor's sect's Marquis Evergreen? It seemed that he had come out to play. To ordinary people, the Black Emperor's sect's Marquis Evergreen was indeed an existence that could not be offended. However, to Xiao Chen, not to mention the only son of the Marquis Evergreen, even if it was the Marquis Evergreen himself, Xiao Chen would not be afraid at all. After introducing himself, He Sheng's face revealed a trace of arrogance. Relying on his father's identity, He Sheng had bullied others many times since he was young. Moreover, every time, due to his father's power, no one dared to do anything to him. However, He Sheng had clearly forgotten a problem. This was the Jin province, not their Ba province. Moreover, the sword sect had already risen and did not fear the Black Emperor's sect. Therefore, Xiao Chen did not care about He Sheng's identity at all. Looking at Xiao Chen arrogantly, He Sheng sneered and said, "You can scram. If the woman stays, this young master can forget about what happened just now." He Sheng did not place Xiao Chen in his eyes at all. Hearing this, the coldness in Xiao Chen's eyes continued to gather as he said indifferently, "Marquis Evergreen? Ha! Not to mention that you're the only son of the Marquis Evergreen. Even if the Marquis Evergreen himself stood before me, he would not dare to speak to me in such a manner." Yang Song. Xiao Chen naturally had nothing to say to He Sheng. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Song, who had been standing behind Xiao Chen, took a step forward. At the same time, the Dao realm aura in his body suddenly erupted. Sensing Yang Song's aura, the few Black Emperor sect experts beside He Sheng changed their expressions. Then, the leader of the group unconsciously exclaimed, "Dao realm expert. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1980. He didn't expect Yang Song to be an End Realm expert. One must know that even He Sheng's father, Evergreen Marquis He Changqing, was just a Dao Realm expert. His cultivation was similar to Yang Song's. To be able to have a Dao Realm expert following him, Xiao Chen's identity wasn't simple. Moreover, He Sheng and his followers weren't strong enough to deal with a Dao realm expert like Yang Song. Moreover, Yang Song wasn't the only one by Xiao Chen's side. Their expressions changed as they felt the terrifying aura coming from Yang Song's body. How could He Sheng and the others not know that they had kicked an iron board? The person in the lead seemed to have reached the comprehension realm. He should be an elder of the Black Emperor's sect. This time, he was specifically in charge of protecting He Sheng. Without hesitation, the elder said to He Sheng, "Young master, leave quickly." Facing a Dao realm expert, they obviously weren't his match. He could only let He Sheng leave first while he held back Yang Song. Unfortunately, when he heard that, Wu Huan, who was standing beside Xiao Chun, said calmly, "Don't you think it's too late to leave now?" As he said that, Wu Huan locked down the surrounding space. Feeling the space being locked down, the Black Emperor's sect elder's expression changed. He couldn't even speak properly as he stuttered, End realm." Yang Song, being a Dao realm expert, already shocked He Sheng and the others. But now, Wu Huan locked down the space. This was obviously the method of an end realm expert. An end realm expert was already on the same level as the four princes of the Black Emperor sect. Who would have thought that Xiao Chan would have so many experts by his side? If it was just Yang Song alone, He Sheng might have a chance to escape. But with Wu Huan, He Sheng had no chance at all. At this moment, He Sheng was completely dumbfounded. He had no idea what kind of person he had provoked. An end realm expert. That was someone even his father had to treat carefully. He Sheng had personally seen how respectful his father was when facing the four kings. At this moment, there was a true end realm expert standing in front of him. Compared to He Sheng, who was scared out of his wits, the elder beside him still maintained a trace of rationality. In the Sword Province, there could only be one identity for Xiao Chun to be able to have a Dao realm expert and an end realm expert by his side at such a young age. Looking at Xiao Chun, the elder said helplessly, "You're the sect leader of the sword sect." He finally guessed Xiao Chen's identity. This way, Xiao Chen's words weren't exaggerated at all. Indeed, even He Sheng's father, He Changqing, didn't dare to act arrogantly in front of Xiao Chun. Moreover, He Sheng actually dared to covet Xiao Chen's woman. Wasn't this just asking for death? He couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with He Sheng. Yang Song directly attacked. First, he killed the Black Emperor's sect elder who was protecting He Sheng. Then, he cleanly killed He Sheng with a punch. Killing He Sheng was nothing to Xiao Chun. A look of displeasure flashed across his eyes. Xiao Chun said unhappily, "What a party pooper." Within the Hundred Sword City, Xiao Chun killed He Sheng. Within the Black Emperor sect, in Marquis Chongqing's cave, He Chongqing's face was extremely gloomy. He sat on the main seat and looked at the elder of the Black Emperor's sect below him. He Chongqing roared furiously, "No matter who it is, I will make you accompany my son in death." As He Chongqing's only son, He Sheng naturally had a life token. Therefore, when Xiao Chun killed He Sheng, He Chongqing already knew. When he thought about how his only son was killed, He Chongqing was furious. He swore to take revenge for his son. He ordered a thorough investigation. Facing the furious He Chongqing, the elder of the Black Emperor sect hurriedly responded respectfully. Then, he hurried towards the Hundred Sword City. He didn't know about He Chongqing's anger. However, even if he knew, Xiao Chun probably wouldn't care. Emir He Chongqing was nothing in Xiao Chen's eyes. After staying in the Hundred Sword City for a day, Xiao Chun and the rest used the teleportation array in the Hundred Sword City to leave the Jian province. They arrived at a large city in the Ba province called Six Corner City. Six Corner City was indeed a large city in the Ba province. It was much more prosperous than the Hundred Sword City. When Xiao Chun and the rest arrived at Six Corner City, He Chongqing finally found some clues in the Black Emperor sect. He also found out that the person who killed his son was currently in Six Corner City. After killing his only son, not only did he not run away, he even dared to enter the Ba province. When he heard this news, He Chongqing personally led a group of people to Six Corner City. He Chongqing didn't know the identity of Xiao Chun and the rest. He hurriedly rushed to Six Corner City. At this moment, the city lord of Six Corner City was already waiting there. When he saw He Changqing walk out of the teleportation array, the city lord of Six Corner City respectfully stepped forward and bowed. "Greetings, Marquis Changqing." "Cut the crap. Where are they?" He Changqing wasn't in the mood to talk nonsense when facing the city lord of Six Corner City. He immediately asked where Xiao Chun and the rest were staying. When he found out that Xiao Chun and the rest were staying in an inn in the city, He Changqing immediately led a group of people there. It was already late at night. Xiao Chun had taken care of the entire inn. At this moment, they were sitting in the courtyard drinking and chatting. However, at this moment, Wu Huan suddenly smiled and said, "Junior, it seems like trouble has come knocking." Xiao Chun knew what Wu Huan was talking about. He smiled faintly and said, "It's fine. It's just a marquee." How could Senior be afraid of him? Just as the two of them finished speaking, the courtyard door was kicked open as expected. Then, He Changqing angrily led a group of people in. When he saw Xiao Chun and the rest, He Changqing angrily shouted, "You're the ones who killed Shang, He Changqing did indeed spoil He Sheng to the extreme. Facing the furious He Changqing, Xiao Chun's expression didn't change at all. He said indifferently, "It was me. You're courting death." When he heard Xiao Chun's words, the killing intent in He Changqing's eyes was extremely dense. With killing intent in his eyes, He Changqing directly slapped out. A terrifying aura surged out from He Changqing's body. The palm print formed from spiritual energy fiercely pressed down on Xiao Chun. It was as if he wanted to smash Xiao Chun into meat paste. However, although He Changqing's attack was filled with hatred, it was a pity that before it could get close to Xiao Chun, it was easily resolved by Wu Huan. It didn't pose any threat at all. Seeing Wu Huan resolve his attack so easily, He Changqing's expression changed slightly. He couldn't help but say, "End realm expert? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1981. His son was killed, so one could imagine how furious He Changqing was. He originally planned to kill Xiao Chun and take revenge for his son, but his palm was easily blocked by Wu Huan. He Changqing's face sunk when he felt the terrifying aura from Wu Huan. He didn't expect that Xiao Chun would have an end realm expert protecting him. He didn't choose to attack. He Changqing wasn't a fool. Facing an end realm expert, if he attacked, he would be asking to die. He looked towards Wu Huan in fear. At the same time, Xiao Chun walked in front of He Changqing and said calmly, "Black Emperor Sect Changqing Marquis. Why? Do you want to kill me? Who exactly are you?" At the start, he didn't care about Xiao Chun's identity, but now, because of Wu Huan's existence, He Changqing started to guess Xiao Chun's identity. Hearing He Changqing's question, Xiao Chun revealed a faint smile. "Me?" Xiao Chun smiled and said. However, just as Xiao Chun opened his mouth, He Changqing reacted quickly. "You are the Sword sect leader, Xiao Chun." He Changqing had actually seen Xiao Chun before. During the battle 10 years ago, He Changqing saw Xiao Chun from afar. However, as he was anxious to take revenge for his son, he didn't think too much about it. However, now that he was so close to Xiao Chun, He Changqing naturally recalled Xiao Chun's identity. Thinking about it, he was so young and had an end realm expert protecting him. Apart from Xiao Chun, who else could it be? He didn't expect that He Sheng would be killed by Xiao Chun. A sense of despair appeared in his heart. He Changqing knew that if Xiao Chun killed He Sheng, then he wouldn't have any hope of taking revenge. Not to mention that he was only one of the 8 great martial marquis of the Black Emperor sect. Even if he was one of the 4 great princes of the Black Emperor sect, it would still be impossible for him to do anything to Xiao Chun. The Sword sect and the Black Emperor sect were both first-rate powers. As the sect leader of the Sword sect, Xiao Chun was naturally not afraid of a mere martial marquis like him. Standing in place, He Changqing's eyes were still filled with anger, but he didn't attack again. He only felt incomparably sullen in his heart. Looking at He Changqing's appearance, it was naturally not difficult for Xiao Chun to guess what he was thinking in his heart. With a faint smile, Xiao Chun said faintly, "I know that He Sheng is your only son, but he deserves to die. He actually dared to set his sights on this lord. He never denied that he had killed He Shang. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, He Chongqing remained silent. After taking a deep look at Xiao Chen, He Chongqing chose to leave in the end. There was no other way. Facing Xiao Chen, He Chongqing simply didn't have the ability to take revenge. Moreover, with He Chongqing's understanding of He Shang probably wasn't in the right at this moment. Moreover, with He Sui's current attitude, the Black Emperor sect definitely wouldn't become enemies with the Sword sect because of He Shang. Therefore, He Chongqing was destined to swallow his broken teeth. With regards to He Chongqing's departure, Xiao Chen didn't stop him. After a night of silence, Xiao Chen and the others prepared to leave early in the morning of the second day. Since they had come to Bazhou, Xiao Chen naturally planned to pay a visit to the Black Emperor's sect. After all, although the relationship between the Sword sect and the Black Emperor sect wasn't very good, on the surface, both sides appear to be friendly. The Black Emperor sect didn't want to start a war with the Sword sect, and the Swordlights similarly didn't want to start a war with the Black Emperor sect. They didn't encounter any danger, and Xiao Chen's group arrived at the Black Emperor sect on the same day. Knowing that Xiao Chen had personally come, He Sui naturally went to personally welcome him. Xiao Chen and He Sui sat opposite each other in the Black Emperor sect's main hall. He Sui looked at Xiao Chen and smiled. It's been many years since we last met. Sect leader Xiao Chen is becoming more and more impressive. Sect leader He Sui is too polite. Compared to the Black Emperor sect, my Sword sect is still far from it, Xiao Chen replied with a smile when he heard that. Xiao Chen didn't have any special motives for coming to the Black Emperor sect. He just wanted to pay a visit. The two of them chatted casually. They talked about some meaningless topics. During this time, they also talked about He Chongqing and He Shang. He Sui obviously knew that He Shang had been killed by Xiao Chen. However, it was just as Xiao Chen had guessed. He Sui didn't take revenge for He Shang at all. He Sui even claimed that He Shang's death was his own doing, saying that he deserved it. How dare he provoke Xiao Chen? He Sui was very enthusiastic about Xiao Chen's group. However, he didn't stay in the Black Emperor sect for long. He only stayed for about 2 to 4 hours before Xiao Chen's group left. Paying a visit to the Black Emperor sect was just for show. There was no special meaning to it. After leaving the Black Emperor sect, Xiao Chen's group quickly left the Bazhou's territory. Then, they passed through several provinces and finally arrived at the Medicine Province where the Dan Valley was located. The Medicine Province was within the influence of the Dan Valley. It was also one of the top provinces in the entire Great Thousand World. Although it was only a province in name, the entire Medicine Province was at least 5 times larger than the Sword Province. Moreover, because this was where the Dan Valley was located, the number of alchemists in the Medicine Province was astonishing. Almost all the alchemists in the Great Thousand World had gathered there. Among the alchemists in the Great Thousand World, regardless of whether they had joined the Dan Valley or not, they would basically settle down in the Medicine Province. Even if they couldn't take root in the Medicine Province for some reason, they would definitely buy property and residence in the Medicine Province. This also caused the atmosphere in the Medicine Province to be very different from other places in the Great Thousand World. In any random city within the Medicine State, one could see quite a few alchemists. The various large clans and forces were basically all made up of alchemists. Alchemists could be seen competing and refining medicine everywhere. At the same time, the Medicine Province had the most number and types of medicinal pills. Almost all the medicinal pills one could think of could be bought in the Medicine Province. The place where countless alchemists gathered also caused the Medicine Province to be far more prosperous than the other provinces in the Great Thousand World. Every day, countless cultivators would come from all over the Great Thousand World in order to find the medicinal pills they liked in the Medicine Province. Of course, although there were countless alchemists in the Medicine Province, the place that everyone really looked forward to was the Dan Valley. However, as one of the 10 Great Lingtian sects, the Dan Valley was not a place that anyone could enter. If one wanted to enter the Dan Valley to seek medicine, one's status must first reach a certain level. Otherwise, it would be difficult to even step into the Dan Valley's gate. In the Medicine Province, Xiao Chun and the others rushed to the Dan Valley at a moderate pace. After about 10 days, they finally arrived at the Dan Valley. Looking at the huge valley in front of them, Xiao Chun smiled and said, "This valley is a city. The Dan Valley is indeed worthy of being one of the 10 great Lingtian sects. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1982. The Dan Valley was located in the largest valley in the medicine state. It might not even be appropriate to call a valley. To be precise, it was located in the middle of 2 mountain ranges. The huge Dan Valley had become the best line of defense. At the entrance, the Dan Valley was like a city with a city wall built. At the same time, the sky above the entire Dan Valley was set up with an anti-flight array. It was worthy of being one of the 10 great Lingtian sects. Its aura alone was much stronger than that of an ordinary force. Even a super force like the Black Emperor sect was far inferior to the Dan Valley. The only force that could compete with the Dan Valley was probably the Sword Sect. After all, the Sword Sect was once one of the 10 great Lingtian sects. The Sword Mountain where the Sword Sect was located was not inferior to the Dan Valley. Looking at the city gate in front of him that was bustling with people, this was the only entrance to the Dan Valley. Anyone who came to the Dan Valley could only enter and leave through this gate. Cultivators from all over the Great Thousand World gathered outside the Dan Valley. They all wanted to go to the Dan Valley to ask for medicine. Unfortunately, there were so many people, but only a small number of people were lucky enough to enter the Dan Valley. A long line had already formed. Many cultivators lined up to enter the Dan Valley one after another. Throughout the entire process, Xiaochen also saw that most people were mercilessly turned away when they arrived at the city gate. In fact, many of these cultivators who lined up to enter the Dan Valley knew that they were not qualified to enter the Dan Valley. However, the Dan Valley's reputation was too great. Moreover, the Dan Valley's medicinal pills were very tempting to cultivators. Therefore, even though they knew it was impossible, they still waited in line to try their luck. In fact, it was not that such a situation did not occur. Sometimes the higher-ups of the Dan Valley might be in a good mood, so some ordinary cultivators could enter the Dan Valley to ask for medicine. However, such a situation was too rare. Most of the time, the Dan Valley had strict restrictions on the number of people who came to ask for medicine and the requirements. The queue was very long, and at this speed, it was estimated that it would take 1 or 2 days to reach the city gate. Therefore, Xiao Chun and his group did not have the intention to line up. Moreover, with Xiao Chen's status, he did not need to line up if he wanted to enter the Dan Valley. As the sect leaders of the 6 super first-rate forces, they naturally had some privileges in the Great Thousand World. Under the escort of Wu Huan, Yang Song, and the others, Xiao Chen's group directly passed through the crowd and walked towards the city gate. When they saw the actions of Xiao Chen's group, there were naturally many people in the crowd who were dissatisfied. After all, they were in line, but Xiao Chen's group directly walked towards the city gate. This naturally made them angry. However, this kind of dissatisfaction only lasted for a moment. As Wu Huan revealed his aura, the people in the queue all turned off. An End-Realm powerhouse obviously had the ability to ignore some rules. Therefore, after sensing Wu Huan's aura, even though there were still many people in the crowd who were dissatisfied, no one dared to be dissatisfied. Seeing Xiao Chen's group walk through the crowd, many people secretly guessed the identity of Xiao Chen's group. Since they did not need to line up, it was obvious that Xiao Chen's group was not ordinary. At the very least, they had to be important figures of a first-rate force. Moreover, they had to be from a relatively strong first-rate force. For ordinary first-rate forces, although they could enter the Dan Valley to ask for medicine, they did not have the privilege of cutting the queue. Only the stronger first-rate forces, the 6 super first-rate forces, or the other sects of the 10 great Lingtian sect had such a privilege. They walked towards the city gate. The people in charge of guarding the city gate were 2 Celestial Emperor realm martial artists. These martial artists were not considered people of the Dan Valley. At most, they were higher guards of the Dan Valley. After all, what the Dan Valley really needed were alchemists. However, one should not underestimate the Dan Valley, just because the Dan Valley was a gathering place for alchemists. One had to know that no matter where they were, alchemists were the wealthiest people. Moreover, they were also very popular. In addition, every time the Dan Valley hired guards, many experts would choose to join the Dan Valley. After all, these experts would receive a lot of benefits if they joined the Dan Valley. Every month, the Dan Valley would provide them with a lot of elixirs for their cultivation as a reward. Therefore, although the Dan Valley was a gathering place for alchemists, there were actually many experts in the Dan Valley. This was also the reason why the Dan Valley was so confident. The experts they hired were enough to contend with any force in the Great Thousand World. Needless to say, each alchemist's connections were terrifying. If the Dan Valley's alchemists really used their connections, the strength of the Dan Valley would be unimaginable. One should not underestimate alchemists, let alone a sect formed by alchemists. When they arrived at the city gate and saw Xiao Chun and his group, the two guards in charge of guarding the city gate took the initiative to speak to Xiao Chun politely. I wonder if you, as guards in the Dan Valley, the two guards were naturally not fools. They knew that many people who came to the Dan Valley were people they could not afford to offend, especially when Wu Huan had just revealed his cultivation realm. In front of an end realm expert, the two guards naturally would not be disrespectful. However, before letting Xiao Chun and his group enter the Dan Valley, the two guards still had to confirm the identities of Xiao Chun and his group. In response to the two guards' inquiry, Xiao Chun smiled and said, "I am Xiao Chun, the sect leader of the Sword Sect. These are the experts of my sword sect." He did not hide his identity. After hearing that Xiao Chun was actually the sect leader of the sword sect, the two guards' attitude became even more respectful. During this period of time, the sword sect could be said to be at the top of the Great Thousand World. It couldn't be helped. After all, the sword sect had just become a super first-rate power. Moreover, even the other super first-rate powers like the Black Emperor sect had already acknowledged the fact that the sword sect had become a super first-rate power. They did not expect that the person who came would be the sect leader of the sword sect. Since the sect leader of the sword sect had personally come, the Dan Valley naturally would not neglect him. Therefore, one of the two guards immediately bowed and said, "So, it is the sect leader of the sword sect. I have bad eyes. Please forgive me, sect leader." "It's fine." Hearing this, Xiao Chun smiled and said, after knowing Xiao Chun's identity, someone quickly invited Xiao Chun and his group into the Dan Valley. However, Xiao Chun and his group could not move freely in the Dan Valley. They were brought to a magnificent hall. This hall was behind the city walls and was not far away. The purpose of this hall was to receive distinguished guests like Xiao Chun. After all, with Xiao Chun's identity, it was naturally impossible for him to stand at the city gates. Therefore, the registration work of Xiao Chun and his group naturally had to be completed in this hall. Moreover, the person in charge of receiving Xiao Chun and his group was no longer an ordinary guard, but a true high-ranking member of the Dan Valley. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1983. Within the main hall, a maid brewed tea for Xiao Chun and the others. At the same time, within the Dan Valley, in a cave, two white-haired old men sat opposite each other. One of them smiled as he spoke. The Sword sect leader personally came to visit. "Interesting. I've heard that this little kid is quite capable, and his talent is also very high. He has only been the clan master of Swords Gate for less than 20 years. And yet, he has already made Swords Gate one of the 6 super first-rate forces. And since he is here, I will go and meet him." As he spoke, one of the old men left. These two old men were definitely famous figures in the world. The two of them were the deputy valley heads of the Dan Valley. The person who stood up and left was Qianyu. He was an end-realm cultivator and also an alchemy grandmaster. The deputy valley head personally came to meet Xiao Chun. From this, one could see how important the sword sect was to the Dan Valley. They didn't have to wait for long in the main hall. Very quickly, Qianyu appeared in front of Xiao Chun and the others. He was dressed in white and had white hair and a youthful face. When he saw Xiao Chun, Qian Yu smiled and said, "Sect leader Xiao Chun." Not knowing Qian Yu's identity, Wu Huan introduced him to Xiao Chun softly. "Junior brother, this is the Dan Valley Deputy Valley Head, Qian Yu." Hearing Wu Huan's words, Xiao Chun quickly smiled and said, "Junior Xiao Chun greets Senior." In front of Qian Yu, Xiao Chun didn't act arrogantly. After all, with Qian Yu's identity, although he was just a Deputy Valley Head of the Dan Valley, in terms of identity, he wasn't weaker than Xiao Chun, the sect leader of the Sword Sect. Seeing Xiao Chun being so humble, Qian Yu smiled faintly. The two of them exchanged a few pleasantries before Qian Yu finally looked at Wu Huan and said, "Brother Wu, I didn't expect that one day you would join a sect. This has surprised this old man. Sect Master is my junior brother. As his senior brother, I naturally have to help him," Wu Huan replied with a smile. Xiao Chun was the successor of the heaven-breaking sword venerate, as well as the disciple of Jun Wuya. Qian Yu had heard these rumors before. When she heard Wu Huan's words, Qian Yu realized that these rumors were probably true. Jun Wuya, the most powerful person in the Great Thousand World, was Xiao Chen's master. In this way, Xiao Chen's identity naturally became even more noble. Jun Wuya didn't belong to any sect and seemed to be alone. However, to be honest, even the Dan Valley didn't want to offend Jun Wuya easily. They thought that this person was very powerful, so powerful that it was a little ridiculous. As the most powerful person in the Great Thousand World, Jun Wuya alone was enough to make any force fear him. After inviting Xiao Chun and the others to take a seat, Qian Yu looked at Xiao Chun and said, "Sect Master Xiao Chun, did you come to the Dan Valley to ask for medicine?" She guessed that Xiao Chun had personally come to the Dan Valley to ask for medicine. After all, there was nothing else in the Dan Valley that could attract Xiao Chun. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun didn't hide anything and immediately nodded in response. That's right. Naturally, he came to the Dan Valley to ask for medicine. Upon hearing this, Qian Yu smiled and said, "Sect Master Xiao Chun, you've come to the right place. In 3 days, my Dan Valley will be holding an auction. At that time, there will be many high-grade medicinal pills up for auction. I'm sure Sect Master Xiao Chun won't be disappointed." Medicinal pill auction? Xiao Chun had never heard of this before, but Wu Huan, Yang Song, and the others were very familiar with it. As a place where alchemists gathered, the Dan Valley would hold a medicinal pill auction every once in a while. The time was uncertain, but every medicinal pill auction could be said to be a grand event held by the Dan Valley. At that time, not only would the martial artists from various provinces come, but even the other 10 great Lingtian sects would send people over. It could be said to be an unprecedented grand event. The last time the Dan Valley held a medicinal pill auction was 60 years ago. At that time, Yang Song happened to attend. It was no wonder that there were so many people outside the city. It turned out that the medicinal pill auction was about to begin. Upon hearing Qian Yu's words, Xiao Chun smiled and said, "Looks like I'm quite lucky. I'll take advantage of Senior's auspicious words and hope that I'll be able to find the treasure I want." They chatted for a while and didn't say anything else. The substantive things were nothing more than getting to know each other. Just as Xiao Chun and Qian Yu were chatting, several Dan Valley disciples walked into the main hall. Under Qian Yu's instructions, they gave Xiao Chun and the others a token. This token was not a treasure. It was just an identity token, and it was only temporary. All the foreign martial artists who entered the Dan Valley must have a temporary identity token like this. Only then could they move freely in the Dan Valley. Of course, the places that they could go were permitted by the Dan Valley. However, without the Dan Valley's permission, they could not enter the Alchemy House or the Seed-giving Mystic Realm. However, this token was also divided into different grades. For example, the tokens that Qian Yu gave to Xiao Chun and the others were of the highest grade. This also meant that within the Dan Valley, Xiao Chun and the others received the highest grade of treatment. This was very different from ordinary tokens. One must know that there were 3 cities in the Dan Valley with a population of several million. Naturally, there were many alchemist families, disciples, handymen, maids, and so on. Moreover, in the Dan Valley, spirit stones were not very useful. If an outsider wanted to live in the Dan Valley, they had to rely entirely on this identity token. Clothing, food, shelter, and transportation, depending on the token you held, the difference was very big. Qianyu directly gave Shao Chun and the others the highest grade of tokens. From this, it could be seen that Qianyu valued the sword sect. Of course, other than the sword sect, perhaps Jun Weiyao was also involved. After accepting the token, Shao Chun cupped his hands and thanked Qianyu. Seeing this, Qianyu smiled and said, "The elixir auction this time will be held in Heavenly Pill City. Later, I will ask someone to send sect leader Shao Chun there." In the Dan Valley, there were 3 cities: Heavenly Pill City, Earth Pill City, and Human Pill City. Among them, Heavenly Pill City was the largest and the most prosperous city. However, if an outsider wanted to live in Heavenly Pill City, they had to hold the highest grade of token. Otherwise, they could only live in Earth Pill City or Human Pill City. The auction would be held in Heavenly Pill City. Qianyu also arranged for Shao Chun and the others to stay in Heavenly Pill City. With regards to this, Shao Chun naturally did not have any objections. The Deputy Valley Master personally received Shao Chun and the others. This was already considered a very high level of courtesy. As for the Dan Valley Master, with Shao Chun's status, it was not enough for him to receive them personally. After all, the Dan Valley Master was a super expert whose cultivation had surpassed the End Realm. In the entire Great World, perhaps only those old monsters from the 10 Great Lingtian sects were worthy of being received personally by the Dan Valley Master. Therefore, to be able to meet Qianyu, it could be said that the Dan Valley valued them greatly. After chatting with Qianyu for a while, Shao Chun and the others left the main hall under the lead of a few Dan Valley disciples. They went through the teleportation formation and arrived in Heavenly Pill City, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1984. With Qianyu's personal arrangements, Shao Chun and his group settled down in a small courtyard with a beautiful environment in the Heavenly Pill City. After settling down in the Heavenly Pill City, Shao Chun and his group were not in a hurry, as there were still 3 days before the auction. After resting for a while, Shao Chun headed to the Heavenly Pill City for a stroll under the strong request of Qin Shru and the other 4 ladies. As for Wu Huan, Yang Song, and the others, they did not follow him this time. After all, it was unlikely that there would be any danger in the Dan Valley. Moreover, fighting was strictly prohibited in the Dan Valley. Otherwise, it would be a violation of the rules of the Dan Valley. Since there was no danger, Shao Chun did not let Wu Huan and Yang Song follow him. After all, everyone was tired from the journey, and he wanted them to have a good rest. Wu Huan, Yang Song, and a few other experts from the sword sect were drinking and resting in their residence, while Shao Chun and his family came to the Heavenly Pill City for a stroll. The Heavenly Pill City was indeed bustling. However, because the people here knew each other, it gave off a different feeling compared to the cities in the outside world. On the streets, groups of men and women could be seen chatting together. They might be the family members of the alchemists in the Dan Valley. They lived in the Heavenly Pill City and helped the Dan Valley to do some chores, such as taking care of the herb fields and so on. It felt like a paradise. The people living in the Dan Valley gave off a feeling of happiness. Everyone's face was filled with smiles. The good thing was that the Dan Valley had never experienced any wars, and there had never been any battles. The people here were very friendly. It was as if the outside world did not exist in the Dan Valley. Qin Shiru's 5 women liked the atmosphere of the Dan Valley very much. However, it made sense when they thought about it. As one of the 10 Great Ling Tian sects, the Dan Valley was very powerful. Therefore, under normal circumstances, no force would come and provoke the Dan Valley. In addition, as a sect of alchemists, the Dan Valley had never participated in any battles in the Great Wide World. Every time a war broke out in the Great Wide World, all the major forces would consciously avoid the Dan Valley. Therefore, the flames of war had never spread to the Dan Valley. The Dan Valley was famous for its neutrality. It was only responsible for alchemy and rarely participated in other matters. Moreover, since the establishment of the Dan Valley, it had never expanded. After so many years, it had only guarded the medicine province and had no intention of expanding. Under the premise of sufficient strength, the Dan Valley's indifference to worldly affairs had created peace in the Dan Valley. It also allowed the people living in the Dan Valley to fully understand what peace and happiness were. In the Dan Valley, one did not have to worry about losing one's life at any time. There was also no need to worry about cheating and scheming. Everyone's life was very relaxed and carefree. Husband, the people here feel so happy. Gu Lingyao took Xiao Chen's arm and said as they strolled around. Hearing this, Xiao Chen nodded slightly and said, "Yes, indeed, the people here are very happy. However, this is also because of the Dan Valley." The Dan Valley was indeed a paradise, and Xiao Chen knew very well that the Sword Sect would definitely not be able to do what the Dan Valley did. Even if the Sword Sect was once again ranked among the 10 great Lingtian sects, it would not be able to do what the Dan Valley did. The reason was very simple. It was because the Sword Sect position was completely different from that of the Dan Valley. Since they had different positions, the paths that the Sword Sect and the Dan Valley took were definitely different. They strolled around the Sword Sect. At the same time, after settling Xiao Chun and the others down, Qianyu returned to the cave. The old man from before was still there. Seeing Qianyu return, the old man smiled and said, "How was it? How did you feel after meeting him in person?" "A dragon among men," Qianyu replied with a smile. The dragon among men that Qianyu was talking about was naturally Xiao Chun. Initially, there were many rumors about Xiao Chun recently. Now that Qianyu had met Xiao Chun in person, her evaluation of Xiao Chun became even higher. When he heard Qianyu's words, the old man smiled and said, "Since you, old man Qian, have said so, then it seems like this boy called Xiao Chun is indeed quite capable." As she spoke, Qian had already sat down opposite the old man. She took a sip of tea and smiled. "This boy is indeed extraordinary, and I can also see that he's ambitious. However, I'm afraid it won't be easy for him to bring the Sword Sect back to the 10 great Lingtian sects. However, it's not impossible either. If the Overlord Emperor is willing to help, I reckon it won't be difficult at all." After confirming that Xiao Chun was the disciple of the Overlord Emperor, Qianyu said with a smile. Many people in the Great Thousand World knew that the Overlord Emperor did not belong to any sect or faction in his life. He had never joined any forces nor established any forces. He had always been alone. As such, if the Overlord Emperor valued Xiao Chun enough, it was entirely possible for him to join the Sword Sect directly. As long as the Overlord Emperor joined the Sword Sect, it would not be difficult for him to bring the Sword Sect back to the 10 great Lingtian sects. Unfortunately, the Overlord Emperor had always done things his own way, and no one knew what he was thinking. Therefore, Qianyu really did not know what the Overlord Emperor was thinking. While Qianyu was talking about the Overlord Emperor in the deepest part of the Dan Valley, in a medicinal garden, an old man with a hoe on his back was standing opposite a soul shadow. This soul shadow was the Overlord Emperor, Jun Wuya. Looking at Jun Wuya's soul shadow, the old man with a hoe on his back smiled. "Old man, you didn't hesitate to use the space secret technique to project a soul shadow to look for me. Is there something you need?" Jun Wuya was obviously not in the Great Thousand World at this time, but he had used the space secret technique to project a soul shadow here, so there was definitely something wrong. Hearing the old man's words, Jun Wuya smiled. "My disciple should be in the Dan Valley now, right?" Jun Wuya came here for no other reason than Xiao Chun. As for how he knew that Xiao Chun was in the Dan Valley, that was unknown. However, with Jun Wuya's methods, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to deduce Xiao Chun's current location. Jun Wuya only appeared here for Xiao Chun. As a result, standing opposite Jun Wuya, the identity of the old man who looked like a mountain villager was obvious. He was the Valley Master of the Dan Valley. Like Jun Wuya, he was also a super expert who had surpassed the End Realm. Hearing Jun Wuya's words, The Dan Valley Master smiled helplessly. They are indeed here, and there are two of them. However, you spent so much effort to find me just for this? Just for this matter, but only for one person. That is my last disciple, Xiao Chen. Jun Wuya smiled. Xiao Chen and Wu Huan were both Jun Wuya's disciples, but Jun Wuya's appearance had nothing to do with Wu Huan. It was completely for Xiao Chen. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1985. Just for one person? Upon hearing Jun Wuya's words, the Dan Valley Master was slightly taken aback. Xiao Chun and Wu Huan could both be considered as Jun Wuya's disciples, but Jun Wuya had used a secret space technique to come here just for one of them. This puzzled the Dan Valley Master. As if he had guessed the Dan Valley Master's thoughts, Jun Wuya smiled and said, Xiao Chun is my last disciple. Nangong Guan, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Xiao Xiao were just Jun Wuya's in-name disciples. The Dan Valley Master knew this, but he didn't expect that Xiao Chun would be Jun Wuya's last disciple. He was indeed surprised, but soon, the Dan Valley Master smiled and said, I didn't expect you to accept a disciple. It seems that this kid is quite lucky to be able to become your disciple. It was indeed Xiao Chen's good fortune that Jun Wuya was willing to accept Xiao Chun as his last disciple. Moreover, if news of this were spread, who knew how many people would envy Xiao Chun to death? Jun Wuya didn't mind the Dan Valley Master's teasing and smiled slightly. Then he said to the Dan Valley Master, Your Dan Valley's 100 Spirits secret realm should. When Jun Wuya suddenly mentioned the 100 Spirits secret realm, the Dan Valley Master's expression changed immediately. Before Jun Wuya could finish his sentence, he shook his head and refused. No, don't even think about it. The 100 Spirits secret realm was a secret realm for cultivation in the Dan Valley. It was very famous in the Great Thousand World. However, every time it was opened, it required a huge amount of resources. Therefore, before Jun Wuya could finish his sentence, the Dan Valley Master rejected him directly. Without even listening, the Dan Valley Master had already guessed that Jun Wuya wanted Xiao Chun to enter the 100 Spirits secret realm. After all, the 100 Spirits secret realm was very useful to the current Xiao Chun. Seeing that the Dan Valley Master rejected him without any explanation, Jun Wuya wasn't angry. A faint smile gradually appeared on his face. Old man, I remember that you still owe me a favor. The Dan Valley Master did indeed owe Jun Wuya a favor. Hearing this, the Dan Valley Master was stunned. Then the Dan Valley Master said in a bad mood, Sai, forget it. All right, I'll open the 100 Spirits secret realm. He owed Jun Wuya a favor. Now, Jun Wuya came to ask for this favor. His condition was to let Xiao Chun enter the 100 Spirits secret realm. Although the Dan Valley Master was a little reluctant, he had no other choice. Seeing that the Dan Valley Master had agreed, Jun Wuya smiled. If that's the case, I'll find my disciple for you. With that, without waiting for the Dan Valley Master's reply, Jun Wuya's figure slowly dissipated, leaving the Dan Valley Master alone in the wind. There were not many of them, only less than 20 of them. Every time the auction started, those who were able to get a private room were all giants in the Great Thousand World. The fact that Xiao Chun and his group were able to get a private room proved that the Dan Valley valued the sword sect. They went directly to the second level. Xiao Chun and his group's private room was right in front of the auction stage. However, just as Xiao Chun was about to enter the private room, Xiao Xiao and some experts from the Moon Palace also happened to arrive. As one of the 10 great Lingtian sects, it was not strange for the Moon Palace to send people to the auction held by the Dan Valley. However, they did not expect Xiao Xiao to come this time. Xiao Chen had not seen Xiao Xiao for more than 10 years since they parted ways at the Sword Sect. Xiao Xiao was very happy to see Xiao Chun and Wu Huan. She quickly walked up to Xiao Chun and greeted him with a smile. Little junior brother. Among the disciples, Xiao Xiao's age was the closest to Xiao Chun. Looking at Xiao Xiao, Xiao Chen also smiled. Senior's sister. Xiao Xiao took the initiative to greet Xiao Chun and the others. At the same time, a beautiful middle-aged woman from the Moon Palace walked over. Xiao Chun did not know the middle-aged woman's identity, but Wu Huan beside him recognized her. As one of the vice palace masters of the Moon Palace, this beautiful woman was also an End Realm expert. She was also a famous figure in the Great Thousand World. Looking at this beautiful woman, Wu Huan smiled and said, "Palace Master Jiyin, I didn't expect you to come too." Her name was Jiyin. Hearing Wu Huan's words, the beautiful woman smiled and then looked at Xiao Chun. A strange light flashed in her eyes. Jiyin took the initiative to speak. This must be the sect master of the sword sect. As expected, heroes come from the young. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1986. Ji-in took the initiative to greet Xiao Chun. Hearing that, Xiao Chun smiled and replied, "Senior, you're too kind." His attitude was very low-key. Hearing that, Ji-in smiled and did not say anything else. However, before she left, she still invited Xiao Chun to visit the Moon Palace when he was free. Back then, the Sword Sect and the Moon Palace had a good relationship. Furthermore, after the Sword Sect declined, the Moon Palace had indeed helped the Sword Sect a lot. If they were responsible, the Sword Sect's losses would probably be even greater. Xiao Chen nodded in response to Ji Yin's invitation. If he had the chance in the future, he would indeed make a trip to the Moon Palace. After that, Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao chatted for a while before the groups separated and entered their respective private rooms. However, Xiao Xiao still told Xiao Chun that after the auction ended, they must have fun in the Dan Valley for a few days. Xiao Chen nodded in agreement. After entering the private room, the decoration of the room was indeed not bad. It was not very luxurious, but it gave people a relaxed and happy feeling. They sat down at the main seat in the center. Qin Shu and the other girls, as well as Xiao Qing, Bai Riyue, Wu Huan, Yang Song, and the others, sat around Xiao Chen. The private rooms were not small, so even though there were close to 20 people in Xiao Chen's group, it did not seem crowded at all. Furthermore, there was a special servant girl in charge of serving them in every private room. However, Xiao Chen did not need this because Qing Yao and Qing Luo were also here. With them serving him, he naturally did not need the servant girls from the Dan Valley. In the private rooms, they drank spirit wine and ate spirit fruits. These things were naturally provided by the Dan Valley and were considered treasures in the outside world. However, they were used to serve the guests attending the auction here. Of course, only the people in the private rooms could enjoy such treatment. For example, the people in the hall on the first floor could only enjoy a simple chair. Other than that, there was only a cup of tea left. The auction would not begin until a while later. Xiao Chun and the others were chatting casually. Time passed slowly. About an hour later, a deputy valley master of Dan Valley came to the auction stage. With that, the auction officially began. Since it was an auction held by Dan Valley, the items being auctioned were naturally related to medicinal pills. Dan Valley immediately took out a pill that surpassed the immortal grade. It was called the Dragon Blood Life Extending Pill. It was a healing pill. Don't underestimate this Dragon Blood Life Extending Pill. It was said that this pill had the effect of regenerating flesh from bones. As long as one still had a breath left, it would be able to preserve one's life. It could be said that it was like having an extra life. This time, Xiao Chen's only purpose in coming to Dan Valley was to find pills that could help his cultivation. Unfortunately, such pills had not appeared yet. Since there were no pills that could attract his attention, Xiao Chen had nothing to do and chatted with the crowd. The auction continued, and soon, the first day of the auction was coming to an end. The auction held by Dan Valley lasted for 3 days. Seeing that the first day of the auction was about to end, Xiao Chen thought that there would not be anything good today. However, when the last pill was put on the stage, a strange look flashed across Xiao Chen's eyes. The last pill was the enlightenment pill that Xiao Qian had taken when he broke through to the enlightenment realm. This enlightenment pill was not available in the sword sect's treasury. Moreover, it was useful for Qin Shiru's 5 women, Long Qing, Xin Yuanling, and the others. After all, they were all in the immortal emperor realm and were about to break through to the enlightenment realm. It was useless to him, but it was useful to Qin Shiru's 5 women. Moreover, this time the Dan Valley's auction had a whole bottle of enlightenment pills. There were 10 pills in total, and the starting price was 10 million upper spiritual stones. In terms of price, the enlightenment pill could not be compared to the dragon blood life extending pill. However, this enlightenment pill was exactly what Xiao Qian needed. Therefore, as soon as the enlightenment pill was put on the stage, Xiao Qian did not hesitate to bid. Xiao Qian bid, but soon someone else bid as well. After all, the highest bidder won the auction. Xiao Qian was not unhappy about this. After all, it was a competition of money. With the sword sect's wealth, Xiao Qian was not afraid of anyone. This was because the sword sect's wealth was comparable to the 10 great Ling Tian sects. Therefore, Xiao Qian was determined to get this bottle of enlightenment pills. Please add it to your collection. Vote recommended. Chapter 1988. Wu Huan invited He Xian to drink, and He Xian didn't reject. However, Xiao Qian didn't join in. After all, he wasn't that familiar with He Xian. Even if he wanted her to join the sword sect, he couldn't be too hasty. It was best for Wu Huan to step in. Wu Huan and He Xian left and headed to Wu Huan's place to drink. Just as Xiao Qian was about to leave, an old man in gray clothes suddenly appeared in front of him. The old man's sudden appearance stunned Xiao Qian. At the same time, he was suspicious. One must know that just a second ago, Wu Huan and He Xian, the 2 end realm experts, were by his side, and they didn't notice the old man's presence at all. Suspicion rose in his heart, but the old man didn't seem to have any enmity towards him. Just as Xiao Qian looked at the old man in confusion, the old man smiled and said, "Little fellow, don't be nervous. I am Dan Xingyang, the Valley Master of the Dan Valley." Dan Valley Master? Hearing this, Xiao Qian was stunned. No wonder Wu Huan and He Xian didn't notice the old man's presence at all. As the Valley Master of the Dan Valley, Dan Xingyang's cultivation surpassed the End Realm. He was a person who truly stood at the peak of the Great Thousand World. If the End Realm experts were said to be the overlords of the Great Thousand World, then people like Dan Xingyang were the overlords of the Great Thousand World. He didn't expect Dan Xingyang to appear here. Looking at him, it seemed like he came specially to find him. After being stunned for a moment, Xiao Qian cupped his hands and bowed. "Junior greets senior. Haha, not bad. You are much more humble than your master." Hearing this, Dan Xingyang laughed loudly. At the same time, he didn't treat Xiao Qian as an outsider and sized up Xiao Qian with a smile. Xiao Qian was indeed a little uncomfortable being stared at by Dan Xingyang. Fortunately, Dan Xingyang did not observe him for long. He quickly withdrew his gaze and laughed softly. "This old man has seen your master before. I'm just here to see you." "Master?" Upon hearing Dan Xingyang's words, the first person that came to Xiao Qian's mind was Jun Wuya. Xiao Qian was not surprised that Jun Wuya and Dan Xingyang knew each other. After all, Jun Wuya was the top expert in the Great Thousand World. It was normal for him to know Dan Xingyang. However, to Xiao Qian's surprise, didn't Jun Wuya travel around the world? Could it be that he had returned so quickly? Xiao Qian looked at Dan Xingyang and asked in confusion, "Senior, could Master have returned to the Great Wide World?" If Jun Wuya had really returned to the Great Wide World, it would be a joke to Xiao Qian. Unfortunately, after hearing Xiao Qian's words, Dan Xingyang shook his head and said, "No. Jun Wuya did not return to the Great Wide World." Immediately after, Dan Xingyang briefly told Xiao Qian about his meeting with Jun Wuya. Either he didn't need them, or the sword sect already had them. He looked at the auction with nothing to do. A full 4 to 6 hours passed. Just as Xiao Chan was about to fall asleep, he heard the Dan Valley's deputy valley master speak up. Everyone, I believe that many of you have heard of the following pill. It is the Celestial Spirit Pill. This Celestial Spirit Pill isn't a top-grade pill, but it is extremely useful for Comprehension Realm and Tao Realm cultivators. Moreover, this time, the Dan Valley will be auctioning a set of 10 bottles of Celestial Spirit Pills at the same time. The starting price will be 20 million high-grade spirit stones. Celestial Spirit Pill. Hearing this, Xiao Chen opened his eyes. His gaze landed on the auction stage. Following the voice of the Dan Valley's deputy valley master, 10 bottles of Celestial Spirit Pills were placed on the auction stage. Each bottle contained 10 pills, so 10 bottles meant 100 pills. He didn't expect the Dan Valley to be so generous this time. Like Xiao Chun, many people became excited when they heard the words Celestial Spirit Pill. However, most of them were Comprehension Realm and Tao Realm cultivators. This was because the Celestial Spirit Pill was only useful to them. End Realm experts could refine Celestial Spirit Pills to cultivate, but the effects weren't that great. Naturally, it wasn't that attractive. However, while End Realm experts didn't care about the Celestial Spirit Pills, Comprehension Realm and Tao Realm cultivators were extremely excited. This included Xiao Chun, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. One of the key reasons why the Sword Sect had fallen from the top 10 Lingtian sects was because of the Coiling Sect. After the Sword Sect had fallen from its pedestal, the Coiling Sect had successfully replaced the Sword Sect's position and entered the top 10 Lingtian sects. It could be said that the main reason why the Sword Sect had fallen from its pedestal was because of the Coiling Sect. Seeing that the Sword Sect was weak, the Coiling Sect, as a super first-rate force, decisively attacked the Sword Sect. In that battle, the Sword Sect was defeated and fell from its pedestal. The Coiling Sect and the Sword Sect were absolute enemies. However, all these years, the Coiling Sect had been busy with other things, so they did not have time to care about the Sword Sect. However, now that the people from the Coiling Sect had made their move, it was obvious that they wanted to annoy the Sword Sect. After telling Xiao Chen the truth about the Sword Sect and the Coiling Sect, a cold gleam flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. He looked coldly at the private room where the Coiling Sect was as he thought to himself, Coiling Sect, it seems like you still haven't given up. The Coiling Sect had never stopped suppressing Jianeng. In fact, many times if it was not for the fact that the top 10 Lingtian sects kept each other in check, causing the Coiling Sect to be unable to focus on dealing with the Sword Sect, the Sword Sect would have been destroyed long ago. During the Dan Valley auction, the Coiling Sect had suddenly made their move with the goal of targeting the Sword Sect. While Xiao Chan felt a chill in his heart, in the private room where the Coiling Sect was located, a skinny old man sat on the main seat. Beside him were 7 or 8 Coiling Sect disciples and elders. The old man also looked at the Sword Sect's private room with a cold smile on his face. The little sect master of the Sword Sect wants these immortal spirit pills. He has to pay a price. Although raising the price on purpose might not have any substantial effect on the Swords Gate, it could still annoy the Swords Gate, and that was more than enough. However, just as the skinny old man finished speaking, Xiao Chen's voice rang out from the private room of the Sword Sect. 70 million, 70 million. Everyone present was shocked when they heard this bid. 70 million for 100 immortal spirit pills was obviously a loss, as it had already exceeded the original value of the immortal spirit pills. Not only were the people present shocked, even Wu Huan, Yang Song, and the others who were sitting beside Xiao Chun were stunned. They did not expect Xiao Chun to raise the price to 70 million. However, Xiao Chun did not change his expression in the face of everyone's shock. On the contrary, a cold smile appeared on his face as he quietly looked at the Coiling Sect's private room, waiting for the Coiling Sect's response.